Chapter 290. Homeless. Andre smiled meaningfully. If a professional like you is willing to sleep on the streets, then all the nobles in Linton City must be blind. Although I don't know how much Black Lily is offering, I'm sure it won't be too low. Benson grinned and echoed, Hee sir, you guessed right. Boss spent a lot of money to poach Scar from the city defense. His weekly salary is enough to feed me for a year. However, this guy does have some skills. In less than 3 days, he has already managed to manage all the gangsters in the back street. Seeing that he had become the target of ridicule, Scar didn't show any signs of anger. Instead, he said in a self-deprecating manner, I can't help it. I have a wife and children to feed. Furthermore, I have to prepare a generous dowry for my daughters. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been tempted by the generous commission to become a thug for the gang. Trust me, it won't be long before you feel lucky for the choice you have made, because soon this street will become the most prosperous place in Linton City. At the same time, it will become a place where a new faction will rise. With that said, Andre patted Scar on the shoulder and walked straight to the entrance. Seeing that Black Lily had a professional from the military like Scar, he could finally relax. He allowed the gang's influence to expand rapidly in the slums without worrying about losing control. There was a saying that said, gangsters aren't scary, but cultured gangsters are. In the past, the gang members were a bunch of starving poor people. The income they earned from committing crimes was barely enough to fill their stomachs. It was impossible for them to attract elites from other industries. But it was different now. After more than a month of reform, the backstreet had shown an unparalleled ability to make money, especially with all kinds of new and exciting entertainment venues. Those rich people found novelty all the time. Originally, they could only earn 1 or 2 silver coins per transaction, but after dressing up, their value had multiplied. Among them, the role-playing activities that were highly sought after by the nobles would cost more than 10 gold coins per session. Bloody gladiators and gambling also brought in huge profits. It was enough to attract a group of people who were relatively poor to join the gang. With their help, they would soon form a complete system that would slowly infiltrate into all walks of life. By the time the nobles realized it, half of the city would have been surrounded by a large net hidden in the dark. Anyone who wanted to get rid of it would have to consider the severity of the consequences. Since they couldn't be eradicated, transactions, compromise, and acceptance became necessary. When the time came, the underground faction would become a fourth political force that couldn't be ignored in Linton City under the tacit agreement of the nobles. As a mastermind behind the scenes, Andre would also obtain a large and efficient information network. Nothing could escape his eyes. After passing through the noisy hall on the first floor, the two of them quickly arrived at a hidden secret door. Benson leaned over a burly man and whispered a few words into his ear. Then, they successfully entered a staircase that led downwards. Before they reached the halfway point, they heard deafening shouts coming from below. Go! Hurry up and attack. Kill that bear. Kill it. I've spent 50 gold coins. Dodge *T, go to hell obediently. I bet. Yes. Bite him to die, to death. Walking out of the staircase, Andre instantly noticed hundreds of spectators raising their fists and roaring at the top of their lungs. There were both men and women among them. Even though they used masks to cover their faces, there was no doubt that they were either nobles or merchants from the way they dressed. None of them cared about the so-called etiquette as they vented the passion hidden deep in their hearts. The women in long dresses were like lunatics. Their faces were flushed red as they constantly let out ear-piercing screams. There were even a few who threw their handkerchiefs into the arena. As for the thing that caused so many people to fall into a frenzy, it was naturally located in the circular pit in the center of the underground hall. A male warrior in his 30s was holding a sword and a shield. He was facing off against a huge brown bear. The man and the beast were fighting with all their might in the not-too-spacious area. Every time they reached a dangerous place, the audience would let out enthusiastic cheers. However, the male warrior's current state was clearly a little dangerous. His shoulder had been scratched open with a bloody wound. Thankfully, his chainmail had a certain degree of defensive ability. Otherwise, his entire arm would have been crippled. His shield was also covered in scratches. Perhaps it was because he had lost too much blood, but his face was abnormally pale. His footsteps were also a little messy. Of course, the bear was not much better. Its brownish-black fur was stained with dark red blood. However, the instincts of a beast made it even more dangerous. Even experienced hunters would be afraid of the ferocious gaze in its eyes. Looking at the fiery scene, the corners of Andre's mouth curled up slightly. He bent down and asked loudly, "Benson, are there always so many people here?" The boy nodded without hesitation and answered excitedly, "Yes, Mr. Mage. We hold 5 matches a day, 5 matches against people. Among them, there are one-on-one matches like the one in front of us. There are also group battles. Basically, every match is full. The customers especially like the scene of blood splattering everywhere. Therefore, they are not stingy when it comes to spending money." "Oh, how are the casualties?" "There were quite a lot of people who died in the first few days. This is because the spectators especially liked to see blood splattering everywhere. As the number of matches increased, the death rate is now less than a third of the original number. As long as the people perform well enough, there is a high chance of survival." As Benson answered the question, he narrowed his eyes and looked around the crowd. After a few seconds, he pointed to a corner in the last row of the spectator stands and said, "Look, the boss is over there. I'll bring you there now." "Okay, let's go." After saying that, Andre glanced at the warrior who was still struggling in the arena and shook his head gently. Clearly, although the man in his 30s was a true professional warrior, his skills were too poor. It would be difficult for him to make a name for himself if he had to put in so much effort to deal with an ordinary brown bear. After all, any feudal knight could easily defeat an adult brown bear. Riding on a warhorse, they could even use the force of the charge to penetrate the opponent's spear in one strike. If they could not even defeat a brown bear, it would be difficult for them to enter the noble's consideration. Carefully bypassing the fanatical spectator stands, the two of them came to the side of a woman in a gray cloak and sat down. Chapter 291. As soon as he sat down, Benson immediately lowered his voice and asked, "Boss, is that you?" The woman in the gray cloak curled her lips in annoyance. "Nonsense. Of course it's me. Who else could it be? Hee, it's just in case." Benson pointed at Andre beside him. "I've brought Mr. Mage here. Take your time to chat." As soon as he finished speaking, he was like a nimble little mouse, darting a few meters away with a whoosh. In the blink of an eye, he was at the staircase that led upstairs. Looking at the boy's skinny back, Black Lily pulled down her hood and rolled her eyes. "TSK, what a clever fellow. He actually ran away so quickly. He's one of your most loyal subordinates, and he's quite capable. With a little training, he'll be able to hold his own." As he spoke, Andre pulled down his hood slightly, revealing 2 flame-like orange-red eyes. They were unusually bright in the dim light. Black Lily Bonnie was shocked. She quickly reached out and gently lifted the hood. Immediately, she saw a head of fiery red hair that was still emitting warmth. She asked in disbelief, "Damn it, what happened to you? It's only been a month, and you've changed so much." Andre shrugged helplessly and explained, "It's nothing. It's just that the latent fire elemental bloodline in my body has been awakened, so I look slightly different from ordinary people. But don't worry, it's a good thing in general." "Special bloodline? Oh my God, you couldn't have been kissed by the goddess of luck when you were born, right?" Bonnie couldn't help but sigh as she caressed her lover's hair and face. As her horizons broadened, she now knew many things. For example, the price of the magical ring on her finger and what it meant to have a bloodline from another plane. Therefore, she felt more and more lucky. The entire back street had undergone such a huge transformation, but the nobles had turned a blind eye to it. Even the patrols that usually liked to take advantage of the situation were well behaved. The reason was simple. The Sorcerers Association had sent out an apprentice to inform her, and all the law enforcement agencies in the city seemed to have become blind, allowing her to do whatever she wanted in the slums. Andre grabbed the hand that was caressing his face and kissed the back of her hand. A faint smile appeared on his face. I don't know if I've been kissed by the goddess of luck, but the troubles around me have never stopped. That's right. How's your strength now? Can you start the second phase? The hidden teasing made Bonnie blush slightly, and she instantly felt her body heat up. She bit her lower lip and resisted the urge to pounce on him. She took a deep breath and replied, "The gang now has about 500 thugs, but there are not many professionals with real strength. As per your instructions, I've hired a warrior and a thief to train a small group of loyal subordinates. I'm afraid we'll have to wait for a while. As for the income, it's pretty good. If you need it, you can take 1,500 to 2,000 gold coins a month. Also, the twin brothers who occupy the last third of the slums have been testing my attitude recently. Judging from their attitude, they seem to be planning to join us. What do you think? Then let's wait a little longer. I'm not sure on money right now, so keep it for yourself. It's best if you can buy a few smuggling ships and slowly infiltrate the other cities of the Green Sea Alliance. As for the twin brothers, let's find a time to meet them. If they're really as strong as the rumors say, I don't mind giving them some benefits." Andre's eyes flashed with a shrewd light. Just a moment ago, he suddenly had a brilliant idea. He planned to take advantage of the current situation and dig a big hole for his opponents. Bonnie frowned slightly. She asked with a look of disbelief, "You mean smuggling? But we don't have a stable supply of goods. As for the twin brothers, I'll contact them as soon as possible. I'll send someone to inform you when I have news." As a gang leader, she was well aware of the huge profits that smuggling could bring, especially some contraband and military goods, such as magic items, potions, excellent weapons, armor, strong crossbows, and so on. If they were sold to regions where metal smelting was not very developed, they could resell them for more than 10 times the profit. Unfortunately, Lincoln City was very strict in this area. Weapons and armor were slightly better, and as long as there were no more than 10 of them, no one would pay attention to them. However, crossbows, magic items, and potions were things that ordinary people couldn't buy even if they had the money. They had to go through a series of complicated procedures and identity verification. After all, these are things that could threaten the safety of the rulers. Of course, even if the management was so strict, the high profits were still very tempting to the smugglers. After avoiding the high taxes, every successful transaction would make a huge profit. On one hand, the buyers would get the goods they urgently needed, and the price would be much lower than the market price. On the other hand, the smugglers would also get a large sum of money. It could be said that both sides were very satisfied. Apart from the rulers who lost a lot of taxes, everyone was happy. The corners of Andre's mouth curled up slightly. He smiled playfully and stroked his chin. "No rush. Take it slow. Let's set up the framework first. I'll be able to provide a stable supply very soon. What do you think of salt?" "Salt?" Upon hearing these two words, Bonnie's eyes immediately widened, releasing a scorching light. You can provide salt?" The salt trade. It was one of the most profitable commodities on the Orire continent. From the king and nobles to the poor and beggars, no one could do without it. Even at the cheapest time, the price per kilogram was almost the same as silver. In some areas where salt was scarce, it could even reach the same price as gold. There was no need to worry about sales. In some areas where gold and silver were scarce, the nobles would sometimes give it to the soldiers as a salary. Even though the southern regions were closer to the sea, and the price of salt was only a third of the price of salt inland, the profits were still quite high. The merchants and nobles of Rhine City relied on the huge salt lake to become the richest people in the entire Green Sea Alliance. It could be said that in Orire, no one could refuse to become a salt merchant, even the most humble of retailers. This was because not only did it mean rich profits, it also symbolized status and status. Any merchant who could get their hands on salt would usually be valued by the rulers of the various regions. Salt was a necessity for the human body. One could avoid eating sweets for a long time, but it was impossible to eat something without a taste for a long time. Chapter 292. Seeing the excited expression on Bonnie's face, Andre immediately knew what she was thinking. He tapped her head lightly with his finger. "Don't get too excited. Not yet. But in a few days, the first batch of salt should arrive at the port. When the time comes, I'll leave a part of it for you to operate. It will be the same every month. What you need to do is to use it as a stepping stone to open up connections with the surrounding cities and quickly establish an intelligence station. Remember, profit is secondary. Don't ever get it reversed. Even though he had been in this world for more than 4 years, he still couldn't really integrate into it, especially some of the very strange values that he couldn't accept. For example, nobles were born with noble blood, and some cheap condiments that could be found everywhere in the supermarket in his previous life could actually be sold at a price comparable to gems. Of course, I understand that gathering intelligence is the main task. But before that, we need a stable and profitable business. Otherwise, how can we support so many people? You have to know that the gang's monthly income is only around 10 to 13,000 gold coins. 70% of it is used for daily expenses. There isn't much money for expansion. After saying that, Bonnie took out the account book from her bosom and threw it on the chair beside her. She flipped to the first page and saw that it was densely filled with all kinds of expenses, especially salaries and buying food, which took up the largest share. The rest was for daily maintenance. Andre only took a glance and immediately frowned. He pointed to the eye-catching red words on the third row and asked, "What's with this large amount of expenses? Don't tell me that you've taken care of all the unemployed people in the slums." Once this matter was brought up, Bonnie's mouth instantly twitched. She helplessly sighed. There's no other way. In order to quickly end the chaos and turmoil, Scarface suggested that I use money to buy these people and give them a stable job. Otherwise, the backstreets won't be so easy to calm down. All right, any change will inevitably harm the interests of some people. In order to ensure that they won't take risks, it's not impossible to give away a part of the benefits. You've done well in this aspect, and at the same time, you've also avoided a lot of trouble. However, it's not a good idea to keep a bunch of idle people around. Find something for them to do as soon as possible. At the very least, they have to make ends meet. As a transmigrator who came from the era of information explosion, Andre was well aware that this was the pain of a gang's transformation. When any organization underwent a fundamental transformation, they would more or less encounter similar problems. Among them, the simplest and most brutal method was to use iron-blooded methods to suppress and purge, completely eliminating the useless people and leaving the useful backbone to be reborn from the ashes. Of course, the downside of doing this was that it would be accompanied by a storm of blood and unpredictable destruction. Usually it would last for several months, but the advantage was that there would be no need to carry too much burden. As long as the reform was completed, it would radiate with unprecedented vitality. As for Black Lily Bonnie's method, it was like boiling a frog in warm water. Her method was relatively gentle. The advantage was that the whole process was more stable and effective. The disadvantage was that she had to bear a heavy burden. The salary and food expenses of several thousand gold coins were the best proof. According to the calculation, the salary of an ordinary person was 1 silver coin a day, which was only about 3 gold coins a month. This meant that the gang was now feeding at least 1,000 to 2,000 people who did not work. Bonnie gently rubbed her forehead and asked with a bitter smile, "Tell me, what good idea do you have?" After thinking for a few minutes, Andre lowered his voice and said, "It's very simple. Set up a few handicraft workshops and put more than half of the people in them. The rest of the people will form a caravan and buy as much food and livestock as possible. I'll give you some funds in a few days. Remember, send the cows, sheep, and horses directly to the manor in Tue's Valley. Store all the food. I'll need it when the time comes." In fact, more than a month ago, he had already asked Lady Anastasia's old butler, Borg, to start buying food from the market. However, in order to prevent the price from rising sharply, he did not make a big move. However, as the shadow of war was getting closer and closer, the price of food was almost inevitable. The nobles and merchants were not fools. They naturally knew how to make a lot of money. Therefore, he did not need to hide it anymore and just openly bought food. Stockpiling food. Is the war really inevitable? Bonnie sharply sensed something. A trace of horror flashed in her eyes. Andre nodded with a serious expression. That's right. The war is about to begin. And according to my estimation, it will last for a long time. When the trade route is blocked, the price of all the necessities will skyrocket. You'd better stock up a batch in advance for a rainy day. Bonnie's face showed an expression of realization. She murmured to herself, I see. I was wondering why there were always some smugglers hinting that I needed their channels recently. Don't worry. Let them wait for a while. When the trade route is blocked, it will be the best time to use the smuggling route. Before Andre could finish his words, the entire Colosseum suddenly burst into a burst of enthusiastic cheers. The warrior in the circular pit in the middle of the Colosseum used a shield to knock open the brown bear's bloody mouth. Then, he stabbed his sword into the bear's heart. There was no doubt that this battle between man and beast was over. This man in his 30s fought hard at the critical moment and successfully delivered a fatal blow. Although his warrior level and martial skills were not very outstanding, the audience still cheered. As for those who lost money, they cursed loudly. Some even tore the gambling receipts into pieces and scattered them all over the sky. Looking at the excited crowd in the audience, Bonnie's mouth curved up slightly. She said with a playful expression, Hee hee, it seems that there were a lot of people who bet on the bear just now. I made a small profit again. How about it? What do you think of the warrior's level? Is he worth recruiting? Forget it. His steps are too messy. He lacks an effective attack method. Otherwise, he would have killed the brown bear long ago. Let me teach you a simple way to identify the level of adventurers. Pay attention to their feet. Those who have steady and agile steps generally have a few tricks up their sleeves. If their steps are stiff, don't try to recruit them, even if they are outstanding in other aspects. After saying that, Andre stood up, pulled his hood tight again, and prepared to get up and leave. He already had a general understanding of the current development of the guild. There was no need to continue watching. Chapter 293. Why are you in such a hurry to leave? Aren't you going to stay and comfort me? Bonnie stood up and whispered in his ear. At the same time, she pressed her voluptuous breasts against his back and reached her hands into his collar to caress his taut muscles. Andre turned his head and looked into her eyes with a playful expression. He pointed to the noisy crowd and asked, Are you sure you want to do it here? Of course not. I don't have the hobby of doing that kind of thing in front of everyone. Come on, my office is just in front. It won't take much time. With that, Bonnie licked her lips seductively and beckoned with her finger. She deliberately swayed her voluptuous buttocks and walked towards the entrance. As you wish, beautiful lady. Andre narrowed his eyes and muttered to himself. He reached out his arm and wrapped it around her slender waist. After a while, they disappeared without a trace with the audience. Just as Andre and Black Lily Bonnie were enjoying their passion in the office, Serena, who was far away in the Cantero Kingdom, had just been conferred a title by the king, Elroy Clovis, and became a lady. Even though she didn't have any real power and her fief didn't increase, she became the de facto ruler of the Northshire with the unborn child in her belly. She was now sitting in a carriage and heading towards Lonely Hill Town. She only had one purpose, and that was to bring Andre's family and friends out. The early spring in the north was still very cold. The bone-chilling wind continued to wreak havoc on the land. Serena sat in the warm carriage and looked out of the glass window in a daze. She gently stroked her slightly protruding belly and muttered to herself, Time flies. More than 2 months have passed in the blink of an eye. I wonder where you are now and if you're doing well. Your lordship, please don't worry. Sir Andre is a mage. With the wisdom he has shown, he can take care of himself no matter where he is. Sitting opposite the carriage, a female warrior in armor comforted her. Serena nodded slightly and sighed self-deprecatingly. Yes, you're right, Morena. He could even defeat a powerful necromancer like Ulysses Domer, so he naturally had a way to deal with any crisis. Maybe it's because I'm pregnant, but I've been feeling a little uneasy recently. The female warrior called Morena raised her arm and showed off her strong biceps. She laughed heartily. Ha ha, don't worry. As long as I'm here, no man or beast can harm you. You should know that I'm the strongest female adventurer in the north, known as the Furious Lion Warrior. It had to be said that it was a little strange for a woman to be given a nickname that was purely masculine. However, this was the cold northern lands, and the toughness of women was no less than that of men. There were even some regions that recruited a large number of women for training, so it was not a big deal. Hee hee, that sounded a lot more reassuring. A smile appeared on Serena's face. Ever since she was appointed as the actual manager of Northshire, she had been recruiting all kinds of talents. When Baron Iverson left, he took almost all of his retainers and aides with him, causing a large area to be in a state of unmanaged state. It was not easy for her to recruit enough people before she had the time to solve other problems. Under the escort of a group of cavalrymen, dozens of carriages sped quickly on the snowy ground and entered the narrow mountain path not long after. The mountain people had always been very vigilant. After this group of more than 50 people appeared, they immediately sounded the alarm. In just 10 minutes, more than 200 militia with spears had gathered. Mayor Barlow stood on the slope with a long sword in his hand, nervously watching the carriages and cavalrymen slowly moving up the slope. When it got closer, he immediately shouted at the top of his voice, "Halt! Who are you? What is your purpose in coming to Lonely Mountain Town? Get out of the way. This is the carriage of the king's newly conferred ladyship, Serena Bradbury. She is the manager of Northshire, the lord of all of you. Hurry up and kneel." A cavalryman wearing metal armor ran out of the group and roared loudly at everyone. The manager of Northshire? Old Barlow was instantly shocked by this news. He opened his mouth slightly and had an expression of disbelief on his face. "Oh my God, what about Baron Iverson?" "Baron Iverson has been transferred to the south. Northshire is now Baron Andre's territory. Ladyship Serena is the manager appointed by the king. All right, hurry up and get out of the way. Otherwise, don't blame me for being rude." As he spoke, the cavalryman raised the spear in his hand and violently tried to disperse the crowd. Just as the sharp tip of the spear was about to touch the crowd, a woman's voice suddenly came from behind. "Hurry up and stop. Sam, put down your weapon. This is the Baron's hometown. Are you planning to use violence here?" The female warrior Morena came out of the carriage and shouted loudly as she moved her stiff body. She was tall and muscular. She looked more than twice as strong as most men. She carried a heavy tower shield on her back and a heavy war hammer on her belt. Her thick arms were as thick as a normal person's thigh. As for her thigh, it was almost as thick as her waist. It had to be said that a woman who looked like this was indeed a bit out of this world, especially when the surrounding cavalrymen were looking at her with a very respectful gaze. The cavalryman called Sam was so scared that he trembled. He quickly put away his spear and lowered his voice to mutter, "Damn it! Why is this woman always looking for trouble?" But cursing was just cursing. He had no intention of disobeying her at all. After all, Morena's combat power was too terrifying. Even the feudal knights were no match for her. So he quickly controlled the war horse under him to retreat a few steps. "Baron, Andre? Oh my God, did I hear wrongly? Andre, the youngest son of the Alger family? That's right. It's said that he's the best hunter in the history of this land. He can even capture terrifying giant beasts like the mammoth, the winter wolf, and the snow bear. Wow, a legend. It sounds exactly like those heroic stories. This is unbelievable. Is there going to be a noble in our lonely mountain town? Hooray. I knew that Boss Andre would become a big shot one day. Yes, but I didn't think that this day would come so soon." For a moment, those who had heard of Andre's name all cried out in surprise. Chapter 294. As a well-known hunter, he had a very high reputation in this small town. Almost everyone, from the children who were a few years old to the elderly who were over 50 years old, regarded him as the best candidate to be the next mayor. Quiet. Old Barrow resisted the shock in his heart and shouted at the militia. He immediately took 2 steps forward and bowed slightly with one hand on his chest. "I'm very sorry, respected lady. Please allow me to confirm. After all, the news you just announced was a bit too shocking. May I ask, Baron Andre is a big boy with red hair and a height of about 165 meters?" Just as he finished speaking, Serena, wearing a noble's long dress, walked out of the carriage and smiled as she replied, "Of course. He is a hunter known far and wide. His family consists of father, mother, brother, sister, and finally a very young sister. A few months ago, he accepted the invitation of the Baron's son, Baron Byron, and went into the depths of the forest to hunt down the necromancer. What, it's only been a few days, and you can't recognize me. You are. Oh, I remember now. You are the female knight who appeared with the Baron's son last time." Old Barrow recalled a bit and immediately cried out in realization. "I am now a lady, and because Andre killed the necromancer on the century-old wanted list, Ulysses Domer, he was conferred the title of Baron by the king and ruled over the entire northern county. My purpose for coming this time is very simple. On one hand, I am here to deliver the necessary living supplies, and on the other hand, I want to bring his family and friends to live in the city." Perhaps because she was used to being straightforward as a knight, Serena never liked to beat around the bush. She stated her purpose simply and clearly, and prepared to resolve this matter as quickly as possible. As she had just taken over the territory not long ago, she had yet to completely consolidate her ruling position. Especially with the spring plowing approaching, she had to return as soon as possible to preside over the general situation. Otherwise, once there was a shortage of food, the consequences would be self-evident. You are saying, Andre, killed that terrifying death necromancer." It was very clear that old Barrow was quite frightened. He subconsciously shivered and couldn't even speak clearly. His two eyes seemed to have been frozen in time, and he stared blankly for half a minute without blinking. As for the others, they fell into a dead silence. After a full 2 minutes, they burst into deafening cheers. Did you hear that? Oh, God of protection. That's Ulysses Domer, who created the bloody New Year massacre. He was actually killed by our genius hunter. Good heavens. Now our town is going to be famous. The hometown of the great hero Andre. What a wonderful name. Damn it. Perhaps in the future, there would be bards who would come to look for boss deeds. I could become famous too. Lonely Mountain Town had always been isolated from the rest of the world, and there were no entertainment programs throughout the year. Even the news they received from the outside world was outdated. Now that such a major event had suddenly occurred, it was natural for them to go crazy. In just a few minutes, those loud people had spread the news throughout the town. Men and women, old and young, all walked onto the streets and asked each other about the real situation. It looked very lively. However, the one who found it most unbelievable was Andre's old-fashioned father, Algernon. He took a deep breath and calmed himself down. He squeezed at the front of the crowd and asked in a trembling voice, "I am Andre's father. Where is he? Yes. Where's my brother? Why didn't he appear?" The eldest son, Atwood, also asked nervously. It was late autumn when Andre set off with the cavalry. It was now early spring, and almost half a year had passed. As a family member, how could he not be worried? Serena stared at the father and son duo with her big, beautiful eyes. She gracefully bowed and said, "I'm very happy to meet you. I'm Serena, the mother of Andre's child that is about to be born." After he defeated the necromancer Ulysses, he caused the underground pit to collapse. He was forced to use a teleportation spell. According to the estimation of the royal wizard Master Domet, he should have been teleported to somewhere in the south. It would take at least a year or two before he could return. Probably because there was too much information, Algernon was so shocked that he couldn't speak for a long time. The hand holding the spear kept trembling, and his face was flushed red. It was unknown whether it was because of happiness or nervousness. Atwood wasn't any better. He pinched his thigh hard, and after confirming that this wasn't a dream, he immediately muttered to himself, "Oh, God, my brother is really good." He actually found himself a beautiful lover before he even reached adulthood, and even has a child with her. Mother will go crazy with joy when she hears this news. Half an hour later, Algernon received Serena and the rest in his simple home. At the same time, he told his wife and 2 daughters about Andre's news. Soon, the family was immersed in a complicated mix of worry and joy. especially after knowing that her brother had become a wizard and had been teleported to the south by magic. A trace of relief flashed across the eldest daughter Betty's face. She smiled and comforted her mother. "All right, mother, don't worry too much. My brother isn't a child. He can even defeat a terrifying enemy like the necromancer. He'll be fine even if he appears in a primitive forest. Besides, Andre has long wanted to leave the town and see the outside world. Who knows, maybe he'll get what he wants." Sigh. Ever since that winter 4 years ago, this child has become a different person. He's constantly learning all sorts of knowledge, and his mind is full of wonderful ideas. I knew that he'd spread his wings and soar like an eagle one day, but I didn't expect this day to come so quickly and so suddenly. Bridget crossed her arms in front of her chest. Her eyes were filled with emotion and pride, as if she was unable to extricate herself from the memories of the past. Mother, Brother Andre is now the Baron. That means I'm also a noble lady and can live in a big castle, right?" The youngest daughter, Barbara, who was nearly 5 years old, widened her eyes as she tugged at the corner of her mother's clothes and asked ecstatically. In the eyes of this little girl, her brother was omnipotent. Running to the south to play was something that made people envious. If she could, she wanted to follow as well. Instead of worrying about her brother's safety, it was better to imagine the beautiful life in the future. For example, beautiful dresses, sweet and soft pastries, castles that often appeared in stories, and so on. Chapter 295. One had to know that the Cantelu Kingdom was located close to the extreme north, and there was no such thing as sugar. The only thing that could produce sweetness was honey, and it was extremely expensive. Some poor nobles in small places could even fight over a few kilograms of honey. Don't laugh. This was a bloody fact and happened almost every year. Even the king had a headache over it. Even in Lincoln City in the south, sweets were still a genuine luxury. Whether it was honey or red cane sugar shipped back from overseas, the price was several times higher than table salt. Only nobles and merchants could afford to enjoy them. Andre used to return from hunting in the past, and he would exchange animal skins and rare plants for a small jar of honey for his young sister to satisfy her cravings. To Babla, that was her happiest holiday. She would never forget the sweet taste of honey that reverberated in her mouth. The little girl's naivety made Serena laugh. She reached out her hand and gently stroked Babla's messy hair as she replied with a smile. "Of course. I guarantee that you'll have endless dresses to wear, endless pastries to eat, a sturdy castle to live in, and soon you'll have a cute nephew or niece." "Wow, that's great. Hooray!" Babla jumped up excitedly, dancing and laughing. Seeing how happy his little sister was, a smile appeared on Atwood's face. He lowered his voice and asked, "So we're moving?" Serena nodded lightly. "Yes, the sooner the better. Don't bring things like pots and pans, food, old clothes, and furniture. There'll be new ones when time comes. If possible, it's best to leave before nightfall. I still have a lot of work to do. After all, it's not easy to manage a prefecture. Just calculating the taxes is a headache. All right, give me an hour or so to say goodbye to my neighbors and friends." As the head of the household, Algernon made a prompt decision. Even though he was a little reluctant, he also knew that there was no future to speak of living in Lonely Mountain Town. He could only fight against hunger, disease, the cold, and the cruel orcs for the rest of his life. From birth to death, there was no choice, only struggle. Serena heaved a sigh of relief when she saw that her main objective had been achieved. She pointed to the carriage filled with supplies at the entrance. "No problem. I'll give you an hour. Distribute the goods to Andre's former friends. I'm also going to town to visit that merchant named Roth. I heard that he's quite capable and good at doing business." "Thank you. The food, ironware, salt, and cloth are what the townspeople need the most. I'm sure they'll be very happy." Algernon stood up and bowed to express his gratitude. However, Serena reacted quickly and held him up. She smiled and waved her hand. "You don't have to be so polite. We're family." Hearing this, a trace of excitement appeared on Algernon Munar's face. He glanced at the woman's slightly protruding belly and said in an extremely joyful tone, "That's right. We are a family. In a few more months, I'll be a grandfather." He'd already let old Barrow see the bloodline certificate issued by the royal archmage, so he didn't doubt that the little life in the womb was his grandson or granddaughter. After all, there were inconceivable arcane and divine spells in this world. It was easy to determine who the child's biological parents were, so tricks like becoming a father would never work. This was especially true for the nobles. Every time a descendant inherited a title, magic would be used to test their bloodline in front of everyone. It was impossible to cheat. Moreover, Algernon didn't think that his family had anything worth plotting against. The trust between people was sometimes so strange. Most of the time, it was tied together by a so-called bond of blood. The trust between blood relatives was often blind and unconditional. Serena, who was officially accepted, was very happy. Just as she was about to say something, a loud noise came from outside the house. "Hey, buddy, you can't stop me. I'm the only merchant in town and the Baron's best friend. Did you know that I'm the one who taught him the common tongue word by word?" It was obvious that this was Fatty Laurent from the glib voice. As an astute merchant, he'd rushed over as soon as he'd heard of this matter, afraid that he'd miss an opportunity to make a meteoric rise. It had to be known that merchants were also divided into classes. The lowest class were the traveling merchants. These people had meager capital and could only rely on selling some small items to earn the difference in price. The profits were so low that it was barely enough to feed their families, and their ability to resist risks was basically zero. The slightest accident would cause them to immediately go bankrupt. The second level would be to have a shop that bought or sold certain goods. They would have a certain amount of capital and their own supply channels. They would have some capital, but they wouldn't have any special privileges. They would be nothing more than fat pigs raised by nobles, who knew when they would find an excuse to rob them of everything. Currently, Latte belonged to this level. The third class had a close relationship with certain nobles and even made money for the nobles themselves. They usually had many privileges, such as being protected by the army, being exempted from taxes in certain areas, and having the government promulgate some laws that were beneficial to them. In short, to ordinary merchants, these fellows were completely undefeatable existences. As for the last type, it was a terrorist organization that had mastered some special techniques and used commercial means to control a large area. They were powerful and secretly manipulated politics, using the resources of the main area for their own use. They kept expanding their forces, which was equivalent to a hidden regime. Of course, the last class was extremely rare. There were probably no more than 10 of them in the entire continent. After all, this was a taboo matter for all rulers. The slightest sign of it would lead to a devastating blow. Laurent's goal was simple. He wanted to use his close relationship with Andre in the past to become a privileged merchant. It didn't matter even if he had to give up 60% of his profits, because only merchants who had the protection of nobles would have their safety guaranteed. They wouldn't have to worry about their assets being taken away from them one day. However, the loyal cavalry captain, Sam, didn't let him in. He gave a very formal reply. "I'm sorry, sir. Her lordship is currently talking to Baron Andre's family. No one can enter." Chapter 296. All right, buddy, you're really a stubborn fellow. How about this? I'll give you a large Therese gold coin, and you'll let me pass. Seeing that his threat had failed, Laurent began to try to bribe Sam. In just a few minutes, he had fully displayed the nature of a merchant. "No, I'm loyal to Lady Serena. Don't try to bribe me with money." Sam rejected him righteously. In fact, it wasn't that he didn't want to take it, but the sound insulation of the old wooden door was too poor. If he didn't do it well, he might give the impression that he was greedy for money. If that happened, his life would be over. Anyone who wasn't an idiot would know what to choose. Laurent did not give up and began to raise the price again. "Damn it, you're really a greedy devil. If one isn't enough, 5. Sigh, sigh, sigh. Don't hit me. I'll give you 10. Io. No, 20. 20 should be enough." Hearing this, Serena could not help but cover her mouth and laugh. She did not expect the fat merchant that Andre had mentioned to be so interesting. He was even funnier than a clown at a palace banquet. As for the others in the house, they all covered their faces. After being neighbors for so many years, everyone knew that the merchant Laurent had a greedy and cunning personality. Especially Barbara, who often went to the grocery store with her brother, was squatting on the floor laughing so hard that her stomach hurt. Serena stopped laughing with great difficulty and immediately shouted to the door, "Sam, don't make things difficult for the merchant. Let him in." "Yes, sir," the leader of the knights replied, and quickly pushed open the door, making a gesture of invitation. With 2 more footprints on his clothes, Luo-Te immediately revealed a victorious expression. He hurriedly tidied up his attire, licked his stomach, and swaggered in. That insufferably arrogant look of his made people gnash their teeth in hatred. Sam's eyes were burning with rage, and he wished that he could rush up and give him 2 more kicks, making this fellow disappear from his sight immediately. Little Sally, whose face was covered in freckles, bowed politely and did not say a word, following closely behind her boss. After sizing up the plump merchant, Serena's lips curled up slightly, and she asked playfully, "You're Laurent, the fatty that Andre mentioned?" "That's right. Your lordship, I am Luo-Te. However, you can forget about the damn fatty at the end. That was just a nickname he came up with for fun. I personally don't like it at all." As he spoke, Luo-Te made a helpless expression and shook the fat on his body. He was well aware of the importance of this meeting. He had to let the other party see his ability and show enough loyalty. Otherwise, the nobles would not give a merchant any special privileges and protection. In order to become a merchant with special privileges, Laurent gave it his all. Not only did he take out the formal attire that he hadn't worn for many years, he even forcefully wrapped it around his waist several times with silk. Finally, one could see that he had a waist. His originally messy hair was also combed with an unknown oil until it was shiny and spotless. Even mosquitoes and flies would slip when they landed on it. There is no doubt that this getup was fatal for a fat man who pursued comfort. He even had to be careful when he breathed. Otherwise, he would instantly fall apart with a bang. "Oh, boss, your gift," little Sally, who had lost her ability to speak, finally managed to form a complete sentence. She then handed over the wooden box in her hand and hid behind the merchant's fat body like a frightened deer. Rot reached out his chubby hand and stroked her blonde hair. He opened the box, took out a small jar of honey, and handed it to Barbara, whose face was full of anticipation. He watched as the greedy little brat happily ran to a corner to steal the honey. Then, he took out a large pile of ores that flickered with dark blue light. As long as one wasn't blind, they would be able to tell at a glance that these were uncut sapphires. There were over 100 of them. He poured all the gems on the table and finally carefully took out a parchment notebook from the bottom of the box. It was as if the sapphires that were worth tens of thousands of gold coins weren't the most precious thing, but this book was. Taking a deep breath, the fat merchant said solemnly, "Your lordship, you might not believe it even if I tell you, but in this town, the person who understands Andre the most isn't his parents, brothers, sisters, or friends. It's me, Luo-Te. Don't be in a hurry to question me. Please read the contents of this notebook first. It's the information I've gathered bit by bit from Andre over the past 4 years. There are maps and mineral distribution near the forest and frozen wasteland, as well as many valuable technologies. At the same time, it also includes insights on internal affairs, business, and military affairs. I believe you'll have a whole new understanding of him after reading it. Please believe me when I say that even though you've been in close contact with him for a long time, that's far from everything. As long as there's a stage where he can let loose, he has the ability to change the entire world. Perhaps in that cold winter 4 years ago, Andre received enlightenment from the gods, or perhaps he received some ancient inheritance. In any case, after reading this notebook, you'll redefine the word genius. It had to be said that not only did Luo-Te's words astonish Serena, but even Andre's family members revealed expressions of disbelief. The house instantly fell into a dead silence. Everyone was silently digesting the information the merchant had expressed, not knowing what to say for a long time. Captain Sam, who was guarding the door, tactfully closed the door and dispersed the surrounding villagers. As a smart young man, he knew that they were likely to talk about some very secretive topics. If he didn't want to get involved in any trouble in the future, it was best to listen less. In Serena's impression, most merchants liked to boast about their products with exaggerated words. Even an ordinary table knife could be described as a sword used to slay dragons. That was why she didn't take it too seriously at first. But after she flipped open the notebook and took a look, she instantly became abnormally serious. She used a short few minutes to roughly skim through the contents, then closed the notebook and stuffed it into her clothes. She narrowed her eyes and asked in a low voice, "These are all things Andre said?" "Of course. I guarantee it with my own life and soul. Otherwise, do you think a lowly merchant like me would have such knowledge?" Laurent bowed respectfully as he replied, "Who has read the contents inside? Or have you mentioned it to anyone?" Chapter 297. As a woman from a small noble family, Serena knew all too well what the content meant. Not to mention the industrial and agricultural technologies that could potentially generate terrifying profits. Just the distribution of minerals and rare plants in Northshire alone was enough to attract the attention of many nobles in the kingdom. One of the main reasons why no big nobles were willing to come to Northshire, and even the small nobles regarded it as a barren land, was that the production was too low. There were no minerals at all except for 2 infertile iron mines. In addition, the cold climate was not suitable for growing wheat, so some people would rather give up their land than come here. Because the Lord of Northshire had to constantly be on guard against the orcs that could come roaring at any time, he had to invest a large amount of money into the construction of the army. However, the profits from this land were so low that if there was a large-scale battle, he would often have to pay for the military out of his own pocket. Therefore, Baron Iverson ran away as soon as he had the chance, not even asking about the death of his own son. Anyway, he could still have another son if one of his sons died, but if he missed the opportunity to change his title, he might be trapped in the barren Northshire for the rest of his life. However, it was different now. According to the description in the notebook, there were many rich minerals at the edge of the Black Forest. Sapphire was one of the most valuable minerals. There were also iron mines, coal mines, copper mines, gold mines, and silver mines. It could be said that the closer one was to the frozen wasteland, the richer the minerals were. As soon as the news leaked out, the nobles would immediately swarm over like sharks that smelled blood. Even the king would personally intervene. During the 4 years of hunting in the forest and the frozen wasteland, Andre had almost traveled to most of the areas in the north. With the knowledge of mineral identification that he had learned in his previous life, he could easily select the types of ores. Unfortunately, he was completely unable to mine them, and even if he did, he could not sell them. According to the law of the Canteru Kingdom, gold and silver mines belonged to the king, while the other mines belonged to the lords. The mountain people had no right to share in any of the profits. Of course, many nobles did not take the first rule seriously and secretly mined countless gold and silver mines. As long as they were secretly made into gold coins, things like gold sand could not flow normally. In his depression, he jokingly mentioned it to the merchant, but who would have thought that the fatty not only confirmed it himself, but also secretly drew the map, preparing to use it as a reference for promotion one day. As for the small amount of industrial and agricultural knowledge, as well as his views on the world, he had accidentally let slip when he was chatting. After all, when Andre had just transmigrated, there were only 2 people in the entire lonely mountain town who were literate. One was the mayor, Barrow, and the other was the merchant, Lot. The former was just a low-ranking officer, while the latter was a merchant who had traveled extensively. It was obvious who would teach him the common language. Another reason was that he was too lonely and could not find a common language with the ignorant residents around him. Therefore, the only knowledgeable merchant became his confidant. That was how the notebook came to be. Laurent noticed a flash of murderous intent from the female noble standing in front of him. He hurriedly raised his hands and shouted, I swear on my soul. Other than you and me, no one else knows about it. Serena heaved a sigh of relief when she heard that there was no third party. She narrowed her eyes and sized up the fat merchant before asking playfully, "Tell me, what do you want? Or should I say, what do you want from me?" "Money, reputation, status. I want to be a noble, to become a respected businessman. I'm willing to pay any price for this, even if it's to become a retainer of you or Andre." The fat all over Lawrence's body trembled nonstop. He was so excited that even his neck was covered in a layer of red, and his eyes were instantly bloodshot. "Interesting. Since you desire these things so much, why don't you take this notebook to the king? Although it's a bit of a bootlicker, I still have to say that His Majesty Elroy Clow is a man of his word. As long as he confirms that there's no problem with the things in the notebook, he'll definitely give you everything you want." Serena had just received the king's conferment and had a good impression of the gentle and refined king, so she couldn't help but ask. In her opinion, since Elroy Clow was willing to give out a county of land as a reward to a meritorious servant, he definitely wouldn't mind giving some benefits to the merchant in front of her after receiving the huge benefits. Laurent shook his head with a wry smile and explained, "No, I can't do that for you. Andre once said that one should never look at a king with the eyes of a normal person. Those who come with a golden crown are definitely cunning, scheming, and ruthless. As long as there's a sufficient price, they'll send their closest friends to the guillotine at any time. I'm just a small merchant who wants to change my social class. I don't have the courage to gamble with the lives of my entire family." Serena nodded thoughtfully and asked, "Then why me?" "There are two reasons. On one hand, you're close to Andre, so you'll definitely give me a chance. Even if you don't give me a chance, at least you won't silence me. On the other hand, Baron Iverson took all his retainers with him when he left, so you especially need someone who's capable, trustworthy, and can bring in a large sum of money." And, at this point, a trace of excitement and yearning appeared on the fat Lawrence's face. "And I've known for a long time that Andre would definitely do something earth-shattering, so I've been silently preparing. Otherwise, I wouldn't have chosen to stay in this desolate and dangerous town, even though I already have a rich family fortune. Although it's a little early now, but in my eyes, it's already time to decide my fate. Power, status, and reputation were simply the most fatal poisons to men. The latent nature in their genes made them more eager to gain the respect of others. This could be seen from the violent tendencies of many adolescent boys who were full of hormones. In fact, this was an extremely immature and childish behavior. Perhaps it was very cool in the eyes of their peers, but once something really happened, they would immediately burst into tears and be worse than the beggars on the streets. Obviously, Laurent wasn't an underage child. He made this decision after careful consideration. At the same time, he understood what he had to pay and what he could get in return. There was a saying that life was like a gamble, and time was a bargaining chip. When you were young, you had all the time, so you could afford to lose. But once you were middle-aged, you had to be careful with every step you took. The slightest carelessness would consign you to eternal damnation, because you didn't have much time left and couldn't afford to lose. Laurent was in such a state now. He had a family, a wife, and children. So even if he wanted to change his fate, he had to ensure that there wouldn't be too serious consequences. Chapter 298. Looking into the merchant's burning eyes, Serena seemed to have sensed something. She immediately took off her glove and extended her right hand with the seal ring. She solemnly said, "Very good. Your sincerity has moved me. Now, kiss this ring and swear an oath of loyalty. After that, you will be the highest internal affairs officer of the Northern County." Without any hesitation, Laurent immediately knelt down and gently kissed the seal ring with his trembling lips. He suppressed the excitement in his heart and shouted, "In the name of the god of loyalty and courage, I swear to be loyal to you and your family, and never betray you until the end of my bloodline. I, Serena Bradbury, Lady of the Canterbury Kingdom, accept your loyalty and promise that as long as you work hard, you will definitely become a member of the nobility and be protected for generations to come." After saying that, Serena used the dagger that she always carried with her, made a small cut on her finger, and tapped on the merchant's forehead. From this moment onwards, the merchant lost his identity as a free citizen and became a loyal retainer of the nobility. As the name implied, a retainer was a servant who offered everything to the nobility, including their life. The two had a very close relationship. The former would gain a lot of benefits by serving the latter, and some would even have the opportunity to become a member of the nobility. This relationship would often last for several generations until one of the family's bloodlines was cut off. It was a solemn ceremony in Oriar that was second only to the enfeoffment of the nobility. However, not just anyone could become a retainer. The nobles were very strict when choosing their retainers. Talent and loyalty were indispensable. Before accepting a retainer, they would often have to go through a long period of observation and evaluation. It was even more meticulous than choosing a wife. After all, the latter would at most affect a generation, but the former could affect the rise and fall of an entire family. A qualified retainer would be able to step forward when the family was in danger, while an unqualified retainer would push a prosperous family into the abyss of death. However, Serena's motive for accepting the fat merchant was much simpler. She didn't want the contents of the notes to be leaked, be it the technology, the distribution of minerals, and other things that could bring about huge benefits, or the shocking remarks. There was no exception. After completing the Oath of Loyalty ceremony, Laurent slowly got up from the ground and shook off the dust on his body. He said with a flattering smile, "Honorable mistress, please be assured that I will not disappoint you." "I hope so, my dear Home Secretary. By the way, what's up with the little girl behind you?" Serena pointed at the nervous and shy Schwelly with a hint of curiosity in her eyes. From the moment she entered the room, she realized that there was something wrong with this girl. She was very alert to unfamiliar things, as if she was afraid of something. Her name is Schwelly, and she's an orphan. She was severely traumatized when she was young. According to Andre, she must have lost part of her speech due to excessive shock. Poor child. If you don't mind, you can take her as a maid. Luote sighed and explained everything that had happened to the girl. Then, he gently pushed the little lowly who was hiding behind him. Hi. Hello." The girl struggled for a long time before she managed to squeeze out these two words from her throat. A pregnant woman's maternal instincts were at its peak. Serena pulled the little one into her embrace and caressed her long blonde hair lovingly. "Seeing your parents die in the mouth of wild beasts at such a young age, it seems like this is a cruel place. Forget it. You could be my personal maid from now on." In Oriar, Lolis had no human rights. Without knowing what was going on, Schwelly was inexplicably promoted from a little servant to a maid. Moreover, she was promoted to a rather high-ranking maid. In the following time, Luote fully displayed his potential as an outstanding businessman. He explained the business model, agricultural model, and handicraft model that he had heard from Andre. At the same time, he gave two sets of feasible plans. On one hand, he slowly reformed agriculture and vigorously developed handicraft industry, using prosperous trade to attract immigrants. Although this method was slow to produce results, it was better to be stable. However, they had to be careful of the leakage of new technology, especially in the area of agriculture. As long as other nobles saw it, they would be able to imitate it. There was no patent protection law in this world. All the people or families who had mastered special skills would try their best to hide their secrets. They would rather die than reveal it. On the other hand, they could secretly mine the gold and silver veins in the forest, secretly make gold and silver coins, and buy a large number of craftsmen and serfs from other nobles. As long as they had people, it would be easy to do anything in the future. The advantage of doing this was that it was fast to produce results, but the hidden danger was also greater. Once spies from other forces found out, it was likely that they would face severe punishment from the king. After all, the king might not dare to offend those deep-rooted nobles. But could he not afford to offend a baron who had just been conferred with an unstable foundation? She had to admit that this was a difficult choice. She felt that she had to think carefully for a while before making a decision. After all, she was only replacing Andre to manage the Northshire. She was not the real lord. So many things were not so legitimate. If she did not do it properly, it would cause a lot of trouble. An hour passed quickly. As all kinds of living materials were distributed to every household, the time to leave had finally arrived. Algernon took his wife, son, and daughter into a carriage, and slowly left the town where he had lived his whole life under the escort of the cavalry. Merchant Lot also left the grocery store to his staff to manage, while he rode on his horse proudly. They set off for the largest city in the Northshire, Olise. He was ready to go all out, watching the group walk further and further away, finally disappearing bit by bit into the small path at the foot of the mountain. Old Barrow lightly exhaled a breath of white air, muttering to himself, "Baron and mage. Huh? You've got the truth, Andre boy. Looks like Lonely Mountain Town might really become a hero's hometown in the future." Perhaps even Andre himself did not know what kind of huge impact he had on the people around him after killing the necromancer. Many people's fates had changed because of this. What he did not expect was that seemingly harmless fat merchant, Lot. This guy actually had the heart to use a whole 4 years to record all the knowledge, techniques, and ideas that had been accidentally leaked. He also personally explored the minerals mentioned before, and even secretly mined a little. Chapter 299. Perhaps no one would have thought that the barren northern county of the Canteru Kingdom was actually a huge treasure trove. Just the gemstones, gold, silver, iron, copper, and coal hidden underground were plentiful. There were also countless rare plants, animals, herbs, wood, magical beasts, and so on. It was completely different from the word barren. Of course, this was not a bad thing. If they could grasp the right timing, it would only take a few years for the sparsely populated northern county to undergo earth-shattering changes. Just as Andre and his family were about to embark on the road to their new home, a good show of conspiracy and betrayal was playing out in the basement of a house in Linton City. Gavin Lauren, who had just experienced a setback, was standing in the shadows and speaking in a low and hoarse voice. "Sir, your arrangements in the border forest have been exposed. Now, not only does the entire association of mages know that the monsters have been reunited, but it won't be long before President Boris will inform the Parliament of Nobles about this news. I've already said that if we can't rope in a young mage Andre, then we have to get rid of him as soon as possible. Otherwise, he will ruin our plans sooner or later." "Oh, tell me, how did he find out?" The mastermind behind the scenes, who was completely hidden under the hood, did not show any signs of panic. Instead, the corners of his mouth curled up slightly, revealing an expression that could be either playful or excited. According to him, the allied forces of the orcs and goblins attacked his territory in Tua's Valley, and there were a large number of fleeing barbarians. This is proof of the huge changes in the forest. There's also another piece of news. The Association of Mages has already discussed and decided that all noble mages will vote against the trade war. Please be careful. I have a bad feeling about this. I'm afraid this mage Andre's background is not ordinary. After saying this, Gavin Lauren bowed slightly and turned to disappear into the darkness. The entire process was silent, as if he had never appeared. The mastermind behind the scenes stroked the short beard on his chin and muttered to himself, "Of course I know his background is not simple. Otherwise, my mentor would not have spent so much effort to build such a magnificent stage. This game is getting more and more interesting. I hope you won't disappoint me, my dear Andre." As soon as his voice fell, he instantly raised his hand and snapped his fingers. Using a very strict tone, he asked, "Explain, what is going on? Didn't I tell you not to go near Tua's Valley?" The half-orc warrior Cass walked out of the dark corridor and bowed deeply. "I'm sorry, Master. I did warn Lars. Normally, he shouldn't disobey orders. How about I go and check it out myself?" The hooded man waved his hand impatiently. "Forget it. Now that things have come to this, I'm afraid I have to pay a price to quell the trouble caused by these idiots. After all, they took the initiative to violate the rules of the game." The rules of the game? Cass frowned in confusion. He couldn't understand what his master was talking about. That's right. There are rules to the confrontation between me and him. You don't need to know the details. In short, don't take the initiative to provoke him for a year, even if it's just a provocation. It's best to keep this in mind otherwise. In an instant, the temperature of the surrounding air suddenly dropped. Cass suddenly realized that he was exhaling white gas from his mouth. The wine in the glass on the table froze into ice at a speed visible to the naked eye. The entire basement seemed to have been frozen. In just a few seconds, a layer of frost had formed on the floor. Terrifying, unimaginable control of magic. Even without any incantation or casting gestures, he could still create a shockingly low temperature. This was definitely not something an ordinary mage could do. Time flew. Andre was hiding in the mansion of Countess Anastasia, studying the encyclopedia of magic potions while teaching his apprentices. The last day of March had unknowingly arrived. Just after midnight, the red carpet was already laid out. The surrounding ground and marble pillars were also wiped clean. The flag of a giant battleship and the sea fluttered in the wind. The knights in charge of security began to patrol the surrounding streets when the sun had just risen. Even the shops were forced to close and could only reopen after the meeting was over. Although there were suspicions of disturbing the residents, there was no other way. The people who came to the meeting were all rulers standing at the top of the pyramid of the city. If any of them were to get into trouble, the whole city would be in chaos. Moreover, the situation had been particularly tense recently, so martial law was a matter of course. The wings of a bat, the tongue of a toad, 5 grams of quartz powder, a small piece of fresh animal liver, the scales of a crucian carp, and finally a woman's ovum before her month. Damn it! What kind of F*** potion formula is this? What the hell is wrong with this world? Where the hell am I going to get an ovum before her month? Andre angrily slammed the table. His eyes were bloodshot as he cursed fiercely. He hadn't slept for 2 days and 2 nights. He was trying to restore an advanced formula activating potion. This thing could turn any inanimate object, including tables, chairs, knives, houses, etc., into living creatures that could understand simple commands. Even plants would be affected. After endless research and experiments, Andre had finally reached the last step. But who would have thought that the last ingredient would be such a strange thing? As a man, how could he have the nerve to ask for such a thing from a woman? A woman's ovum before her month. He really didn't know how the inventor of the activating potion came up with such a thing. Of course, the inventor could also be a woman. After many failed attempts, she threw something that shouldn't have been thrown in. After all, a woman's temper would be very irritable before and after a few days of discomfort. It wasn't strange for her to do something out of line. Just when Andre was at his wit's end, there was a sudden knock on the door of the room, followed by the voice of the old butler, Borg. "Sir, although I know that you're busy with profound magic research, today is the last day of the month. You'd better pack up quickly. In 3 hours, the Dukes will hold a closed-door meeting about the start of the trade war. If you are late, don't even think of walking through the door." Chapter 300. So fast. It's already the 31st? It seems that even in another world, my otaku nature is still so terrifying. After muttering to himself, Andre rubbed his dry and swollen eyes, and a trace of helplessness and self-deprecation appeared on his face. In his previous life, he was particularly focused when doing things. He would often be so engrossed in something that he would immediately forget the passage of time. He would not eat, drink, or sleep until he finished the task or collapsed from exhaustion. Otherwise, he would never stop. Perhaps it was this characteristic that gave him an extremely terrifying memory and learning ability. No matter if it was a book or information that he had read, he would remember it firmly. When he grew up, he could still reproduce the names, student numbers, and seats of his first-grade classmates in his mind. He was also particularly good at observation and analysis, and could easily analyze the other party's character from their movements and expressions. Basically, only 2 out of 10 people would be slightly different. It had to be said that this was a very terrifying talent, enough to let Andre get along like a fish in water most of the time, but at the same time, it also increased the possibility of being deceived by the facade on the surface. Fortunately, he always knew where his limits were, and he never pretended to guess the limits of people who were particularly smart and experienced in life. This was because these guys usually wore several masks in their daily lives, and their acting skills were comparable to Oscar-winning actors. They knew how to hide their inner thoughts. Borg, who was standing outside the door, had obviously heard the sentence just now. He hurriedly explained with a wry smile, "That's right, today is the 31st. You have been in there for 2 days and 2 nights, and during this time, you have not drunk a single drop of water. If you continue, I'm afraid your body won't be able to take it." Andre simply tidied up the things on the table and recited a spell to encyclopedia of magic potions. In an instant, this large and heavy book folded in half with a bang. Whether it was the volume or the thickness, it had shrunk by a generation. Then it folded again and again and again. In the blink of an eye, it had become the size of a palm. It was so fascinating that it was like a pocket-sized diary. It was unbelievable to the extreme. In fact, Andre had only discovered after repeated research that this book actually had a zoom spell attached to it for ease of carrying. As long as he recited the incantation recorded in invisible ink on the last page, he could immediately enlarge or shrink the book. Carefully stuffing the shrunken book into his pocket, he opened the door and said to the butler with a tired face, "Thank you for your concern. Please prepare some hot water for me. After a bath and some food, I'll take a carriage to the Parliament building and settle this mess once and for all. Also, forget it. I'll think of a way myself. Sir, if there's anything you need, please let me know. Don't worry, I'm a hereditary butler who has served the Mariel family for 7 generations. There's no problem with my loyalty or ability. I can definitely keep any secret." As he spoke, Borg, who was over 50 years old, bowed meticulously. It was obvious that he could see Andre's hesitation. At the same time, he understood that this matter might be more troublesome, but he still took the initiative to step forward out of his responsibility as a butler. After hesitating for a few seconds, Andre took a deep breath and mustered his courage. He lowered his voice and whispered into the old butler's ear, "The potion I'm researching requires a woman's ovum to be discharged about 10 days before her first month of pregnancy. If you have a way, help me soak a few in salt water." "WH, what?" Borg's face was instantly filled with shock. Even though he had mentally prepared himself, he was still quite shocked. "You didn't hear wrong. It's that thing. The potion I'm researching needs it." Andre rubbed the space between his eyebrows, his eyes filled with helplessness. As long as there was a substitute, he wouldn't choose to ask others for help. According to the book, ovum represented life and was the most important component of the activation potion. Every bottle needed one. Borg patted his own head lightly and smiled bitterly as he muttered to himself, "Heavens, this is an extremely difficult task. I've lived for so many years, and I've faced cruel pirates, despicable and cunning nobles, and liars with mouths full of lies. However, none of them are as difficult as obtaining a woman's ovum. All right, I'll take it as a challenge. After all, I'm also very curious about this magical potion. Ha ha! I guarantee that the potion's effects will be beyond imagination. When it's done, I'll definitely invite you to see the results." After saying that, Andre patted the old butler's shoulder and walked towards the bathroom in high spirits. As he delved deeper into the study of arcane magic, he increasingly felt that the ancient magic civilization was not inferior to Earth in the 21st century at all. Of course, although Earth's civil technology was more advanced, its cutting-edge military force and technology were not inferior at all. In fact, they might even be more powerful. The most destructive weapon on Earth was the hydrogen bomb, and the most destructive weapon of the ancient magic civilization was the legendary magic. Some of them could even create magic black holes, summon meteorites to crash into the Earth, trigger underground volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, blizzards, and use negative energy to kill all living things that came into contact with them. In short, the ancient magic civilization could do everything that people on Earth would not dare to think of, and they could do it even better. Even things like creating life were no exception. Through a deep understanding of magic energy, powerful sorcerers could endow stones, trees, steel, magma, and anything else with life and intelligence, allowing them to learn, think, and have their own unique personality and soul like humans. What a great achievement! However, it was a pity that with the last decline of magic, countless research results were lost. The activation potion that Andre was currently working on was one of them, and that was the creation of life. Although the effect of the potion could only last for half an hour at most, it was still equivalent to taking half a step into the realm of God, as scientists on Earth called it. How could he not be excited? How could he not be excited? He felt that he was becoming more and more like those mad scientists in the movies before he transmigrated. Sometimes, his brain would often come up with many strange ideas. Hopefully, he would not create a life form like Frankenstein. After all, the world of magic was so colorful and so profound that people would unknowingly be immersed in it and unable to extricate themselves. Then, they would slowly lose their sense of good and evil, and their humanity would gradually disappear, turning them into a cold researcher who only knew how to pursue results. Chapter 301. If that really happened, then all life would be nothing more than a series of numbers, experiments, and research subjects in their eyes. They wouldn't feel guilty even if they cut a newborn baby into pieces. They would be like cold machines, chasing after the endless truth of the universe. Perhaps no one in their right mind would want to end up like that. At least, Andre himself didn't want to end up like that. That was why he kept reminding himself of his bottom line, to ensure that the red line in his heart was always clear. After taking a nap in the steaming hot bath for more than an hour, he finally washed off the filth on his body. He went to the dining hall to have a simple breakfast and got into the carriage that the butler had prepared for him, heading towards the city hall. As someone who was very good at thinking logically, he knew the importance of today's meeting. At the same time, he also knew that he was about to meet the old Lich's disciple. From the moment they met, the dangerous game would begin. The city hall was the second tallest building in Linton City. The tallest was the Tower of the Mage Association, but the latter couldn't compare to the former in terms of grandeur and size. The marble pillars carved with epic stories set off the building's extraordinarily majestic appearance and gave off a surging feeling. 2 rows of guards of honor stood at the entrance, holding long halberds and wearing golden armor. They stood motionless on the spot, with a bright red feather on their helmets. Even the boots on their feet were uniformly dyed gold, reflecting the dazzling light of the sun. It fully reflected the wealth of this city. After all, the ruler of Orair didn't know that if copper and tin were mixed together in a certain ratio, it would produce the same luster as gold. The glittering armor and weapons in front of him were all covered in a thick layer of gold. If they were used to make gold coins, a set of them would be able to make at least 1,000 gold coins. But now they were being used on flashy guards of honor. It was an extreme waste of money. Apart from that, the red handmade carpet on the ground also reflected the wealth of Linton City. It cost about 230 gold coins per square meter, and it covered the entire road from the entrance to the council hall. It was at least 1,000 or 2,000 square meters. What made people even more envious was that when the patterns on the carpet were connected, they actually told a long story. There was no doubt that they were custom-made and were used in formal occasions to show off the city's powerful financial resources. Blatant flaunting of wealth. Andre, who had been tight on money recently, even wanted to knock the guards unconscious and steal all these valuable items, sell them, and exchange them for various magical materials to support his research. However, after considering the level of security around him, he finally gave up on this crazy idea. After all, with his current level as a mage, it was impossible for him to deal with an entire group of feudal knights. Not to mention, there were also detection spells at the entrance of the hall. Even an invisibility spell would be useless. As long as he got a little closer, he would immediately be exposed. Facing the morning sun, a large number of nobles dressed in formal attire began to ride their carriages to the small square in front of the Parliament building. Among them, there were white-haired old men handsome young men, and a small number of women. They greeted each other while maintaining their elegant poise, walking into the hall in groups of 3 to 5. It was obvious that these fellows were the people at the top of the pyramid structure. Many of them were from ancient families with prominent identities. It was said that their origins could be traced back to thousands of years ago. They had taken root here when Lincoln City was first built and had a very wide influence. Andre, who was mixed in the crowd, did not say a word. He silently observed those who were worthy of his attention. After a short while, he arrived at the circular central hall and found a random corner to sit down and rest. Although he had always kept a low profile, he was still very eye-catching in the eyes of a group of old fellows whose average age was above 45 years old. Even if he used a hood to cover his flame-like hair and pupils, it was still the same. Virginia, who is that young man? Why haven't I seen him before? A white-haired old man asked the middle-aged man sitting next to him in a low voice. The man called Virginia narrowed his eyes and sized up the young man for a few minutes. He quickly noticed the badge on his chest, and his expression changed slightly. He replied in a low voice, "He is the potion master that has been spreading like wildfire these past 2 days, Andre. He is not even 15 years old this year, but he is already a 5th-level mage. He has also been promoted to a senior member of the Mage Association." "Oh, that is an incredible achievement. Which family does he belong to? Who is his mentor?" The old man's eyes shone as he continued to ask with great interest. Virginia helplessly shook his head. "I'm not too sure. According to my investigation, he first appeared in the depths of the border forest. He met Alger's adventurer team and came to the city together. There is no other information about him. However, the Mariel family seems to have the intention of forming a marriage alliance with him. I think there must be some secret deal between the two parties. After all, Countess Anasta of Western Xia led the fleet out to sea for more than a month. Everything will be clear when she returns. Also, I heard from Zebulon 2 days ago that this young man seems to have a special bloodline. For the local nobles, investigating a person's background was a piece of cake. After all, the old nobles had intermarried for generations. It took hundreds of years to weave a huge and complicated network of connections. Not only could it be used to pursue more benefits, but it could also be used to pass on information. Andre understood this, which was why he gave up on the upper-class society and started with the gangs to form an alternative intelligence network. He knew that he was a complete newbie to these ancient families that had been around for countless years. Instead of spending countless efforts to squeeze in, he might as well start from scratch. After all, no one in the Green Sea Alliance had realized the great potential of the world of darkness. As soon as he heard about the special bloodline, the old man's eyes lit up even more. His tone became extremely excited. "Are you sure? You know that this is not a joke." "It should be. I heard that he revealed his special appearance in the internal meeting of the Sorcerers Association a few days ago. His hair burned like flames on top of his head, and his eyes were orange. It's definitely not something a normal human can have," Virginia answered with certainty. Even if he got the news from someone else, he acted as if he had gone through a lot of trouble to find out. Chapter 302. Excellent. Remember, don't mention this to anyone else. Once the meeting is over, we'll invite him to the auction in the afternoon. We'll bring my granddaughter, Rebecca, and your daughter, Cecilia, to let the youngsters get to know each other. The earlier we do something like this, the more benefits there will be. As he spoke, the corners of the old man's mouth curled upwards, revealing a trace of greed. From his point of view, Andre was a gold mine waiting to be mined. Only by seizing the opportunity would he be able to get the biggest slice of the cake. Dear uncle, I don't need you to remind me of this. I've already asked Cecilia to change into her sexiest dress and wait in the carriage outside. I believe that with her beauty and methods, she'll be able to take down this young man easily. At the very least, she'll be able to integrate a new bloodline into the Wickley family," Virginia said proudly. "Damn it, you didn't even inform me when you got the news. I'm your uncle. The Mantell family and the Wickley family have been married for generations. We're allies. Your way of doing things is just too heartbreaking." The old man began to curse indignantly, but anyone who wasn't an idiot could tell that his incomparably angry look was an act. Virginia stroked her beautiful mustache and bowed with a playful expression. "I'm very sorry, Uncle George. When faced with huge benefits, no ally is more important than one's own family. If I remember correctly, you taught me this when I was 15. However, I'll still leave you with a chance. I can't guarantee the dukes, but the other nobles definitely don't know about this." The old man, called George, glared fiercely at his nephew and nodded with gritted teeth. "Very good. You've really grown up. The Mantell family owes the Wickley family a favor this time. I'll repay it in the future. I'm glad you understand. Come, Uncle, let's hug. Don't let others see us as a joke." Virginia opened her arms as she spoke, waiting for a response. "Treacherous kid, don't be too proud. You got the upper hand this time, but you won't be so lucky next time." After saying that, George hugged his nephew tightly, and the two of them completed the exchange of benefits without anyone noticing. In fact, such things were happening in the seats in the hall. The nobles were quietly exchanging information with each other and looking for allies. In just 10 minutes, they had formed small circles and were ready to show their strength in the upcoming game, fighting for and protecting their own interests. As time passed by, the number of people in the hall increased. The small circles gradually merged into the large circle. In the end, two large factions were formed. On the other side were the radicals who advocated a trade war. Most of their families were supported by sea trade, so they would not allow anyone to challenge Lincoln City's position as the strongest in the southern seas. Otherwise, if the safety of the ships could not be guaranteed, then 1 or 2 losses would be enough to hurt them. On the other side was the opposition. Most of these families were involved in artisanal workshops, cash crops, food, and other fixed industries. Therefore, they preferred a more stable method. War was too destructive to the economy and was not in their interest. However, these did not have much to do with Andre. He was only here to be a bystander. As long as he voted against the proposal, he would be done with it. After all, as a political newcomer, he did not have any influence in this circle. It was even more impossible for him to affect the direction of the overall situation. Situations like in the stories where one could make a big reversal with just words would never happen in reality. No benefits. No benefits. Just empty words to make a group of black-hearted and ruthless rulers bow their heads. What a joke. People who could participate in politics were not simple. Not only did they have Oscar-worthy acting skills, even if they were murdering people 1 second, they could pretend to be saints the next. They also had eloquence comparable to Su Qin and Zhang Yi. They could turn black into white and good into bad. Why would such a group of people change their stance when there were no benefits to be gained? There was a saying that politicians were the dirtiest, most despicable, and most shameless profession in the world. In order to climb to a higher position, they would often do anything. One had to be very careful when dealing with them. Otherwise, one would never know when one would be betrayed. Sitting alone in a corner with his eyes closed, Andre quickly attracted a lot of attention, especially from a few members of the Sorcerers Association. They all looked at him with envy, jealousy, longing, and joy. Some people who knew the inside story even wanted to squeeze through the crowd and sit next to him. With the spread of the 2 long-lost magic potions, Andre's title as a Master Potion Master was fully established. The higher-ups were well aware of his great value, so it caused quite a commotion. Just as the situation started to get out of control, a few people suddenly appeared at the entrance. The one at the front was none other than the most powerful duke in the city, Georgie Bridle. The other 3 behind him were obviously the other 3 dukes. They were Alexander Alvey, Ian Lockett, and Loretta Botons. Behind the dukes was the president of the Sorcerers Association, Archmage Boris. Even the bishops of the major churches who rarely participated in political activities appeared. As the big shots of the city, the whole hall quickly quieted down when they appeared. The nobles stood up and bowed to greet them. Only Andre sat quietly in the corner with his eyes closed. He looked like he was asleep. Duke Georgie Bridle looked around with a pair of sharp eyes. He quickly noticed that the only one who did not stand was Andre. The corners of his mouth curled up into a playful smile. He said in a half-joking tone, "Sir President, our young Master Potion Master doesn't seem to like this kind of occasion. Look, he's already asleep." Boris stroked the short beard on his chin. He laughed and shook his head. "Ha ha, my dear Duke, you must know that endless politics is the best hypnotic for a talented sorcerer. However, it's good for him to feel and familiarize himself with the atmosphere here. After all, as my successor, even if he doesn't like it, he should at least have some contact." "Oh, are you planning to let him take over the position of president in the future?" The other Duke, Alexander Arvey, exclaimed in surprise. Chapter 303. The Association of Mages was one of the most important foundations of Linton City, and the president was the one in control of this enormous force. Therefore, every change in authority would attract the attention of various parties, and there would even be competition in the dark. Although it was all within the rules, the degree of danger was not small at all. That's right. I'm sure you all know that I'm already more than 100 years old. Although I've used some methods to extend my life, the effects are not obvious. It won't be long before I bid farewell to this world, so I must find a successor as soon as possible. Although Andre is still young, he's already shown terrifying talent. Coupled with his achievements in potions, I think he'll be recognized by most of the members. After all, everyone has benefited from the potions he made, right? After saying this, Boris raised his head and looked at the dukes without backing down. As the president of the Association of Mages, he did not want to compromise with anyone in this aspect. When necessary, it was not impossible for him to ally with the other nobles to go against the dukes. In fact, when the nobles first established the Association of Mages, they desired a supernatural organization that they could use. However, they never thought that the power of magic was naturally filled with the aura of freedom, and that mages could not be controlled by ordinary people. Therefore, in less than 30 years after its establishment, the association completely lost control. The first president used his own knowledge and wisdom to restore a part of the ancient magic civilization's proud puppet-making techniques, and created something like the golems that were almost invulnerable. From then on, he cut off the nobles' control over the association. He was very clear that magic research required a large amount of money and resources, so he did not choose to fall out with them. Instead, he took the initiative to propose an alliance. One side would provide magic potions, items, and magic support, while the other side would provide resources and social status. The two sides combined perfectly, and from then on, Linton City soared into the sky, establishing the future dominance of the southern seas. However, the nobles, especially the four dukes who stood at the top, never gave up on interfering with the association's internal affairs. Every time the president changed, they would use various methods to regain control of the tower. Therefore, the two sides never stopped secretly probing each other. It was clear that now that Boris had clearly pointed out the successor, it meant that a new round of competition had begun. Of course, this was only an exchange of benefits. As his body aged faster and faster, this great mage became more and more afraid of his impending death. As long as Andre could bring him away to escape death, he was willing to pay any price. In front of so many people, Georgie Bridle did not want to reveal the conflict between the dukes and the Association of Mages. He took a deep breath and said meaningfully, "I admit that the young mage you have chosen has brought us a lot of benefits. I also agree to let him be the candidate for the future president. But in the end, whether or not he succeeds will depend on the speed of his leveling. After all, there's so many mages who can't possibly obey a single 5th rank mage." Level 5. A scornful smile appeared on Boris's face as he shook his head gently. "I'm sorry, my dear Duke. Your information is a bit slow. A few days ago, I confirmed that Andre is already a 7th level mage. In the entire Mage Association, there are only a handful of people with a higher level than him. Well, let's stop talking about this for now. So many people are still waiting for the meeting. 7th level. Duke Loretta Botan's eyes flashed with a strange light. The corner of his mouth lifted slightly, and an imperceptible smile flashed across his face. He then glanced at Andre, who was still resting with his eyes closed. The index finger of his right hand twitched slightly, but he hid it so well that no one noticed. As the weakest of the four dukes, and the youngest, only 35 years old, he rarely expressed his own opinions and was always echoing the opinions of others. Basically, he did not have much of a presence, so it was easy to ignore him. Well, as far as I'm concerned, your cards are bigger than all of us combined. As long as he can maintain this speed of leveling up, I don't mind acknowledging the established fact. But no matter what you do, you have to pay the price. The position of the president of the Association of Mages is not cheap. I think we should find some time to sit down and talk about the conditions. What do you think? Seeing that his interference was futile, Duke Alvis immediately changed his target. There was no doubt that he didn't want to give up any opportunity to gain benefits. Especially after testing the effects of a hero potion, he had been planning to get the formula. At the very least, he wanted to get at least 70% of the quota. Boris had long been aware of the greed of the nobles, but he believed that Andre could handle it well, so he shrugged his shoulders indifferently. No problem. I'll ask him to stay and talk to you after the meeting. That's great. I've been looking forward to having a face-to-face chat with this genius and discussing life goals and whatnot. Oh, by the way, he seems to have an extremely rare, special bloodline, right? Duke Alvis pretended to be excited as he probed. Don't worry, you'll know when you see him. After saying this, Boris shut his mouth and remained silent. He didn't answer any more questions. Duke Georgi Bridle, who knew his temper like the back of his hand, smiled lightly. He turned around and walked to the center of the hall. He raised his mallet and knocked on the table. He raised his arms and shouted, "Gentlemen, ladies, I believe you already know the purpose of today's meeting, so I won't waste any more time. Now, as the president of the Supreme Council of Lincoln City, I declare that the meeting begins. Guards, close the door." "As you wish, Mr. President." A knight in full armor saluted with his sword and turned around to close the door. As the embodiment of democracy and freedom in the upper-class society, all the nobles who entered the hall had to temporarily give up their titles and participate in politics with special identities such as the president, the highest clerk, or the counselor. Even the dukes who stood at the top of the pyramid were no exception. Of course, these so-called democracy and freedom were pure bullshit in Andre's eyes. They were just the products of the rulers fighting for power and mutual compromise. As a matter of fact, there could never be so-called equality and freedom between people, and class could never be eliminated. These things would only become blurred with the development of productivity and the advancement of social ideology. It could also be said that they were fooling people or brainwashing them. Chapter 304. To give a simple example, in the early 20th century on Earth, whoever controlled the newspapers controlled the public opinion, which in turn controlled the thoughts of the majority of ordinary people. But with the advancement of technology, in the 21st century, newspapers were no longer the only source of information. Television, movies, radio, and more media joined the ranks of controlling public opinion. Only after the rise of the internet did those who had been kept in the dark discover in shock that the government had been treating them like idiots for so many years. This principle told us that in a situation where education and information were seriously unequal, it was easy to be deceived. It was just like how most of the residents of Lincoln City believed that the municipal building was the highest embodiment of democracy and freedom. In fact, they didn't know that they were just the targets of exploitation by the upper class. 99% of the profits from their daily work went into the pockets of the nobles and merchants, while the ordinary workers received just enough to make ends meet. In this world where monopoly and privilege prevailed, there was no such thing as fair competition. The path from the lower class to the upper class was so narrow that it was negligible. Even though Andre was already a member of the privileged class, he still hadn't completely changed his mindset and was still very resistant to certain methods. But as a smart person, He always hid these dissatisfaction in his heart and never showed it. This was because he understood that in this world, there were only individuals who betrayed their class, but never a class that betrayed its class. If he betrayed his current class, then he would have to bear the terrible consequences alone. Orire was a world where supernatural forces prevailed. A rebellion from the bottom up would never succeed, so he could only avoid it. Everyone, this isn't the first time Bakarov City has provoked us, nor is it the first time they started a trade war. But I want to remind you that this time is different from any other time. They use an extremely arrogant tone to issue a declaration of war. Now, let's have the highest clerk, Ian Lockett, read the contents of the letter. Please control your emotions and don't interrupt before he finishes reading. As a political veteran, Georgie Bridle was obviously very good at stirring up the atmosphere. With just a few words, he stirred up the hatred and disgust of many people towards Bakarov City. As the second most powerful duke in Linton City, Ian Lockett was also known as a cold man, or an emotionless puppet. It was said that he valued the rules very much. In his early years, he even personally executed his own 4-year-old daughter. The reason was that this ignorant little girl violated the family's ban and used the patriarch's seal ring to stamp a document. This document caused the family to lose tens of thousands of gold coins. Without any anger or hesitation, he simply asked his retainers to read the content of the ban. Then, ignoring his wife's pleas, he strangled the girl's neck with silk and buried her in the family graveyard. From then on, no one dared to violate the rules he set. All the nobles understood what was going on. Ian Lockett had just become a duke and lacked prestige, so he used his young daughter to establish his prestige. He was simply inhumane to the extreme. He was a complete scum from head to toe. Of course, the effect was indescribable. A person who was vicious enough to kill his own flesh and blood would be respected no matter what. Thus, most nobles were afraid of this madman and gave him the highest position, second only to the chairman of the council. This man in his 50s had his short silver hair neatly combed. He walked to the center of the hall with an expressionless face and bowed slightly to everyone. Then, he took out a manuscript and read aloud. To the greedy vultures of Linton City. He had just started when the nobles who came to attend the meeting exploded in anger. They all stood up and started cursing. Bastards! What are these scum of Bakarov City trying to do? How dare they call us vultures? Yes, this is a naked provocation. Show them what we're made of. War. We want war. Sink their warships. Rob their merchant ships. Show these frogs at the bottom of a well what the strongest navy of the South looks like. Cut off the trade route of Bakarov City. Let these idiots know the consequences of angering us. When the citizens riot because of the lack of resources, the Bakarov City Council will learn what respect is. For a moment, most of the people in the hall looked like they were about to reach the heavens. The clamor didn't stop. Even the factions that opposed the trade war couldn't help but clamor, wanting to teach the other side a lesson. Looking at the chaotic scene in the hall, Andre opened his eyes. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly, revealing a sarcastic smile. He muttered to himself, "Haha, you can even turn black into white. In this world, the one with the biggest fist is the one with the right." Ever since he returned to Linton City and discovered the Mastermind's plan, he went to the Mage Association's library to look up the grudge between the two cities. He didn't know if he didn't look, but when he did, he was shocked. In fact, the reason why the two sides hated each other wasn't because of Bakarov City's greed for Linton City's wealth, but because more than 100 years ago, Linton City's navy was the first to plunder Bakarov City's gold ships, forcibly occupying the island rich in gold reserves and mining it clean within 20 years. As the saying went, cutting off one's path to wealth was akin to killing one's parents. Moreover, what they robbed wasn't a small amount, but an entire gold mine. At the very least, it could be made into tens of millions of gold coins. Who could bear such humiliation? That was why Bakarov City repeatedly challenged Linton City's position as the overlord of the sea. Their goal was to take revenge for what happened back then. However, looking at the scene now, Bakarov City had only spoken the truth. The nobles of Linton City were like cats with their fur standing on end. They bared their fangs and brandished their claws, as if they were the victims. Such an astonishingly similar scene reminded Andre of a certain superpower on Earth. It also stirred up wars for its own interests, but it pretended to maintain world peace. Once its territory was attacked in retaliation, it would immediately yell that it was a terrorist attack and then launch a frenzied retaliation. Through the developed internet, he had seen through the hypocritical and bloody nature of the leaders of countless countries in the world. He sneered at their clown-like performance in front of the media. Chapter 305. But now that he had personally experienced all of this, Andre didn't have the urge to mock them like before. He felt like he was watching a play where everyone was a dedicated actor, and he was the only audience outside the stage. He didn't know if this feeling was an illusion, but it lasted for a few minutes until the boiling hall finally quieted down. Listening to Ian Lockett's calm and monotonous voice, Andre lost all interest. He closed his eyes and fell into a deep sleep. Ever since the declaration of war appeared, he instantly understood that all his previous efforts had been in vain. Originally, the pro-war faction and the anti-war faction were equal in power, but the declaration of war was full of sarcasm, successfully provoking the anger of many nobles. The scales of victory had already tilted towards the pro-war faction. What they had to do next was no longer to prevent the outbreak of the trade war, but to consider how to obtain the most benefits from this protracted tug-of-war. There were more than 250 people in Lincoln City who were qualified to participate in the meeting. Apart from a few who were unable to return in time, such as Countess Anastasia, the rest were basically all present. With so many people belonging to different factions, it would be strange if they were all gathered together to discuss a problem. From 8 o'clock in the morning until 10 o'clock, regardless of whether it was the side that supported war or the side that supported restraint, they all sent their eloquent members to the stage to provide evidence, make speeches, and incite emotions. In the end, no one was able to obtain an overwhelming support, which was more than 2/3 of the support. In the end, Georgie Bridle had no choice but to follow the ancient tradition and hold a referendum. The side with the most votes would win. In fact, he had already discussed this with the other dukes in private. The trade war had to be fought no matter what. Otherwise, if Bokaro City took the initiative, a large number of trade routes would be threatened. Once the safety of merchant ships couldn't be guaranteed, this city that had prospered through maritime trade and commerce would quickly decline. Just like on Earth, during the great age of navigation from the 15th to the 19th century, many European countries desperately developed their own navies. If they lost their advantage in the sea, it wouldn't take long for the whole country to decline. Regarding this point, countries such as Spain, Portugal, and the Netherlands were ready-made examples. There was no doubt that Bakharov wasn't the only city competing with Lincoln for supremacy in the seas. Thus, they had to destroy the challengers as quickly and fiercely as possible. Otherwise, more and more enemies would join the fray, charging forward like a pack of wolves to snatch the fruits of victory. Hey, Mr. Senator, wake up. It's time for you to vote. Just as Andre was sleeping soundly, he suddenly heard a vague voice in his ear. At the same time, the other party kept pushing him. Helplessly, he sighed and slowly opened his eyes. Immediately, he saw a knight in armor standing beside him. The knight's face was filled with envy, jealousy, surprise, disbelief, and many other emotions. It was an interesting look. "Mr. Senator, please cast your last vote." As he spoke, the knight quickly came back to his senses and presented a piece of parchment and a quill with both hands. Glancing at the gazes that were directed at him from all directions, Andre smiled playfully. He picked up a pen and wrote down the result of the internal discussion of the Sorcerers Association. Objection. He threw it directly into the ballot box. After that, he unscrupulously yawned, stretched his body, and sat quietly in his seat, waiting for the end of the meeting. His unique actions attracted a lot of attention, especially the strand of fiery red hair that was revealed when he stood up. Immediately, the nobles in the hall began to whisper to each other. After all, as long as one wasn't blind, They could see the ruby badge on Andre's chest that only senior members of the Mage Association would have. Paired with his overly young face, strange hair color, and eyes, it was hard not to attract attention. Alexander Arvey smiled and asked Boris beside him, "Mr. President, this is the successor you've chosen? If he can maintain this state of no desire for politics, I swear I will raise both hands in approval." Ha ha! Young people are inevitably tired of long meetings and arguments. When he gets older, he will naturally understand the mystery. But a president who doesn't like politics like this is actually a good thing for us. Joji Bridle laughed and added insult to injury. Then let us wait and see. Boris didn't even bother to argue. He just responded with a sentence. After several in-depth discussions, he was most aware of Andre's expanding ambition. The lazy look in front of him was completely a disguise to numb everyone. If the Dukes really believed that he was a harmless young man, they would definitely suffer a big setback in the end. The inflexible Ian Lockett did not care about the other Dukes teasing the president. He focused on opening the ballot box and began to count the votes one by one. Every time he finished reading a chapter, he would open the ballot box and raise it up high for everyone to see to show fairness. More than 250 votes were read for more than 40 minutes. When the last vote was read, many of the older people instantly breathed a sigh of relief. One must know that the seats in the meeting hall were made of marble. These old men who were over 70 years old had been sitting on them for more than 2 hours. Their bodies were already unable to take it, and a few of them might even faint after a while. As the president, Joji Bridle didn't intend to delay any longer. He slammed the gavel and shouted, "Silence! I now announce the results of this vote. According to the statistics just now, 143 votes against 116 votes. The launch of the trade war is officially approved. Dismissed. Hooray! Let our invincible warships kick their butts. Ha! It's time to teach these idiots a lesson and make them remember. Awesome! Finally, they could rightfully plunder their merchant ships, loot the coastal towns and villages." When the final results were announced, the pro-war faction stood up and cheered loudly. Especially those families who owned warships. They were so excited that they clenched their fists. They couldn't wait to go out to sea and plunder the local merchant ships. In the Green Sea Alliance, once the city-states agreed to start a trade war with each other, both sides could attack ships flying the other's flag without limit. If they captured nobles or merchants, they could even openly demand ransom. It was a great opportunity to make a fortune from the war. Chapter 306. Andre smiled contemptuously as he looked at the elated faces of the nobles, muttering to himself, "Laugh. Laugh as much as you can. Laugh while you still can. You'll all be crying." He believed that once the war started, Lincoln City would quickly gain a certain degree of advantage. There might even be some lucky ones who would strike it rich, and the citizens who would be stimulated by the wealth would go crazy. They would fight to be the first to join the trade war, and when more than 60% of the ships joined the war, what would happen next? That's right. What would happen next would be total annihilation. The mastermind behind the scenes would definitely set up a huge trap, luring all the ships to the designated sea and annihilating them all in one fell swoop, completing the magnificent feat of destroying Lincoln City's navy. From strategy to tactics, then from the complicated relationship of interest to the enemy's psychology, everything was grasped with such precision. Even if the enemy knew there was a conspiracy, they would still have to jump in. "Friend I've never met before, you really are a fearsome opponent. I really hope to meet you soon." After muttering softly, Andre took a deep breath, stood up, and was about to walk out. Since the meeting had ended, the originally tightly shut doors had been reopened. A knight was loudly announcing the results to the citizens in the small square. Everything looked so orderly. However, before he could leave the circular platform, he was stopped by Boris. "Don't be in such a hurry to leave. The Dukes have something to discuss with you. Come with me." "Me? What is it?" Andre asked, confused. Even though the title of Genius Mage and Potion Master had been widely spread in the circle of nobles under his meticulous arrangements, he was still just a potential stock in front of the true bigwigs. If he wanted to reach a higher level, he would need to show more value. Oomph. Those greedy vultures have their eyes on the formulas of the magic potions in your hands, especially the hero potion. A few days ago, Chief Knight Anson personally tried one of the bottles and felt that his vitality and endurance had increased by an entire level. He was able to hold on for a full 20 minutes against 5 knights in actual combat training. I have to say, your potion's effects are indeed outstanding, so some people have evil intentions. Saying so, a cold glint flashed in Boris's eyes. Archmages like him hated people who wanted to steal the results of others, and saw it as a provocation to the rules of mages. If the other party wasn't a powerful duke, they would have been torn to pieces long ago. Hearing the chairman describe the dukes as the vultures in Bacaro City, Andre couldn't help but shake his head with a laugh. Please don't worry. I can guarantee that even if I concoct 100 hero potions in front of everyone, those who shouldn't learn it won't. This requires the skill of a Grandmaster. It's a pity that there is no one in Lincoln can be called a potion master other than me. Perhaps this was a bit of a boast, but it was definitely the truth. As someone who had the means to cheat, no matter if it was oral knowledge or a book, as long as he read or listened to it, he would immediately record it into his brain. It was like a file stored in a hard drive, and he could access it at any time. It was because of this that Andre could easily grasp the countless complicated alchemy techniques and step into the ranks of a master potion master. If an ordinary person wanted to reach this level, they would need at least 80 to 100 years of training. It had to be known that the Encyclopedia of Magic Potions had recorded more than 2,000 kinds of commonly used potions, as well as more than 1,000 kinds of strange formulas. The scope of the potions was unimaginable, and it could be said that it covered everything from the lowest level to the highest level to the highest level. Other than a monster like the old lich who had lived for many years, who would have the time and energy to be addicted to potions. Even if one reached the level of a master potion master, it would be a waste of effort if they didn't have a corresponding wizard rank. After all, since magic potions had the word magic in them, it meant that they had to be cast. The higher the level of the potion, the higher the rank of the arcane spell. Wasting time on making potions meant that one wouldn't have the time to increase their own strength. If things went wrong, they might even cause their wizard rank to drop due to making too many potions. As such, the number of potion masters in Orire could be counted on one hand. The reason why Andre dared to take out 2 potion formulas with such great effects was because he was certain that no one other than himself would be able to successfully make them. As such, he wasn't afraid of people spying on him at all. In fact, he was very much looking forward to this day. Only by displaying his powerful alchemy skills in front of everyone would he be able to gain the attention of the higher-ups, quickly increasing his authority and becoming an important person in this city. Since you're already confident, I won't accompany you. Go and send them away yourself. Remember, no matter what those fellows promise, don't believe them. They're not good people. Saying this, Boris raised his finger and pointed to a room in the inner corridor. He then turned and walked towards the door, disappearing into the crowd in a short while. Haha, Master, I'm afraid you don't know that I'm not a good person either. Anyone who wants to take advantage of me will have to pay a price, a very painful price. Andre looked at the noisy citizens outside, the corners of his mouth slightly raised, revealing a mixture of playfulness and mockery. If you're always scheming against others, you must be prepared to be used by others. Since the dukes were the first to reach out their greedy hands, then they couldn't blame him for using underhanded means. It just so happened that he lacked a few cannon fodders in the front line to attract the attention of the enemy. Let the nobles and the mastermind consume each other first. After thinking this through, Andre went straight to the guest room and directly pushed the door open. Immediately, he saw 4 men in formal attire. The oldest looked to be in his early 70s, and the youngest was only 34 or 35 years old. Each of them had a strong aura, giving people a very heavy feeling of oppression. Obviously, the 4 dukes wanted to bully him because he was young and wanted to take him down a notch. But it was a pity that Andre didn't fall for it. He only bowed slightly and asked with a smile, "Just now, the chairman said that you were looking for me. May I know what you need from me?" "Please have a seat, young man. There's no need to be so nervous. We're just looking for you to discuss whether you can give us the formula of the hero potion. With our financial resources, we can definitely give you a satisfactory price." Alvy got straight to the point. In his eyes, a young man like Andre wasn't worth too much brainstorming. He could just use money to pave the way. Chapter 307. That's right, child. As long as you hand over the hero potions formula, not only will we guarantee you a large sum of money, we will also support you in becoming the next president of the Sorcerers Association. What do you think? Isn't that a good deal? Georgie Bridle chimed in while the iron was hot. As the top nobles of the city, the most powerful forces they had were high-level warriors and feudal knights. Therefore, a potion that could greatly increase the combat power of warriors and feudal knights was definitely worth any price. Seeing that the other party was treating him like a child, Andre chuckled inwardly. He feigned innocence and said, "Please tell me in detail what benefits I will get. You have to know that my mentor spent a great deal of time and effort to restore these formulas. If I were to casually hand them over to others, he would be furious. I remember that when he was angry last time, he killed thousands of people, many of whom were feudal knights." Hearing this, Alexandria's face instantly darkened. He knew that this was a blatant threat. What Georgie meant was, "I'm fine with handing over the formula, but don't expect to get it without paying a price. Otherwise, even if I agree to it, my backer won't agree to it." After many artistic embellishments and Boris's silent acknowledgement, many of the higher-ups in Linton City knew that Andre had a terrifyingly powerful mentor. His level was even higher than the president of the Sorcerers Association. How could they not be afraid of such a powerful backer? After all, if a great wizard wanted to kill someone, there were too many ways to do so. Just the list alone could fill up 6 or 7 parchments. It was simply impossible to guard against. Ian, who had always been cautious, asked carefully, "If it's convenient, can you tell me who your mentor is?" "I'm very sorry. My mentor doesn't allow me to mention his name outside. However, he's on his way here. He should be here in a year or so." After saying that, Andre pretended to be excited, as if he was happy that his mentor was about to arrive. This was not the first time he had used a non-existent mentor's name to scare people, and it would not be the last time. The corner of Alexandria's mouth twitched slightly. He forced a smile and nodded. "Ah, that's great. I can't wait to see the face of this great wizard. I believe the whole of Linton City will be in an uproar when the time comes." Although his disguise was not bad, Andre immediately saw through his true thoughts. It was obvious that the Duke was cursing himself for being so unlucky. He wanted to snatch a magic potion formula, but he ended up attracting an enemy that he couldn't afford to provoke. What a miscalculation. "Name your price, young man, as long as it's not too much. The hero potion is a must-have for us. It means too many things. Moreover, the trade war has already begun, so we have a huge demand for it. Since you can't provide so many finished products, why don't you offer the formula in exchange for other things?" Georgie could tell that the young man in front of him was mature and cunning beyond his age. Those little tricks were useless, so he decided to go straight to the point. Andre didn't show the slightest bit of panic in the face of the Dukes. He only smiled and shrugged. "I'm very sorry, Your Grace, but I can't name a price. Unless you have the skills of a master, you won't be able to concoct a true hero potion. At most, you can only concoct 5 to 10% of the original potion. Of course, you may not believe me, but it's fine. I can demonstrate the concoction process. Once you see it, you'll understand that there are many problems in this world that can't be solved with money and power alone." Ever since he saw the legendary Lich, who had the entire South in the palm of his hand, he had lost the last trace of respect for the Dukes. He spoke to them as if they were equals, even condescending. Although Andre knew that the power he had was far from being able to compare to the private soldiers of the Dukes, it was only a matter of time before he surpassed them with the help of the system in the shape of an eye on his left hand. Perhaps in a year or 2 or 3, Once he reached level 11, he would be able to start deciphering the magic lock on a necromancer's spellbook and inherit all the arcane spells and magic circles in it. If he really got into a fight, perhaps even President Boris would have to admit defeat. Ulysses Domer was known as the most terrifying magic genius in the history of the Cantera Kingdom. When he was less than 20 years old, he completed his apprenticeship and became an official mage. Following that, he spent another 15 years to raise his mage level to above level 10. He had invented more than 6 new spells and countless potion recipes and large-scale magic arrays. Some people even thought that he had the potential to cross the threshold before he was 200 years old and become the first legendary mage in 600 years. However, for unknown reasons, this powerful necromancer fell out with his close friend and king, Victor III, and fought against the entire kingdom alone. Although he caused great damage to the capital, he was still severely injured in the end and had no choice but to escape to the frozen wastelands in the far north to live in seclusion. As everyone knew, magic research required a lot of resources. Otherwise, it would be inefficient. This was also why most mage organizations were attached to a country or city. They had to rely on the financial resources of the other party to provide them with resources. However, Ulysses was wanted, and he had to capture a few people to do experiments himself. A lot of time was wasted, which directly led to his slow progress in leveling up and the loss of the opportunity to become a legendary mage. Andre believed that as long as he inherited all of Ulysses' research results, he would definitely be able to greatly increase his strength in a short time and become the most powerful spellcaster in Lincoln City. Oh, it seems that you are very confident. It just so happens that I have made some preparations. Why don't we make a bottle here? With that, he clapped his hands twice, and a few people walked out from the inner room. There was a young attendant and a woman in her 50s. She was none other than Evelyn, who was in charge of potion production in the Association of Mages. It was obvious that the Dukes had made preparations. Not only did they prepare the equipment and raw materials in advance, but they also invited an expert in potion making. Evelyn quickly ordered the attendants to arrange everything neatly. Then, she respectfully made a gesture of invitation. "Master, please. I have checked the alchemy items needed for the hero potion. They are all here." Chapter 308. Thank you. Andre nodded and walked straight to the table. He lit up the alcohol stove and poured the distilled water mixed with the alchemy solution into the test tube. At the same time, he used his other hand to put several kinds of plant powder into the glassware according to the ratio and activated it with magic energy. The whole process was very smooth, and there was no pause at all. What was even more frightening was that in a series of complicated movements, he could also take into account the intensity of the magic energy and always kept the plant powder in the most active state. The moment the water temperature reached 100 degrees Celsius, a gram and a half of the powder was thrown into the test tube, and after a short 2 seconds, there was a burst of red and blue smoke. In fact, during the ancient magic civilization, the hero potion was a kind of potion that was given to warriors, rogues, knights, and other close combat professions. Usually, dozens of bottles could be made in large glassware at a time. However, in order to show the Dukes who were in charge, Andre purposely used the most difficult small dosage, which was to make only 1 bottle at a time. Everyone knew that the higher the dosage, the higher the fault tolerance, and the smaller the dosage, the more likely it was that the hand would shake, and the smaller the dosage, the more likely it would become a waste product. Today, he was going to establish his title as a potion master in front of everyone. He was going to let those who were eager to make trouble know that there were some things that they could not control. The hero potion was still being made, but Evelyn had already given up the idea of stealing it. The current frequency, speed, precise control of magic energy, and the ability to multitask had already exceeded the limit of a normal mage. To be exact, it was the limit of all the members of the association, including Boris. Art. It was a perfect performance. Evelyn could not believe that such a skillful technique could be used by a kid who was not even an adult yet. As the temperature of the liquid in the test tube continued to rise, the red and blue gas gradually became transparent and emitted a faint pungent smell. At this moment, Andre immediately cast the spell that he had prepared. A dazzling light flashed, and the transparent liquid in the bottle suddenly changed color. Half of it was red, and the other half was blue. Seeing that it was a success, he immediately stuffed the cork into the mouth of the bottle and carefully shook it with a pair of pliers. A faint smile appeared on his face, and then he asked the stunned crowd, "I'm done. How is it? Do you understand? How is it?" Duke Alexander, who was determined to get the hero potion, turned his head and asked Evelyn. The female mage, who looked to be in her 50s, shook her head with a bitter smile. "I'm sorry. This is the domain of a true master. I can't even do 1/3 or even 1/5 of it. Your Grace, please give up. Let alone Linton City, there isn't a second apothecary in the entire Green Sea Alliance who can reach this level. Are you sure you're not joking?" He was only 14 years old. Even if he had started learning at the age of 5, it had only been 10 years. But you were already the chief pharmacist of Linton City 20 years ago. Alexander obviously couldn't accept this reality as he stood up and yelled in agitation. "Calm down, my friend. You shouldn't lose your composure like that." Georgie couldn't stand it anymore and reminded him with a frown. Alexander instantly came to his senses and realized that he was a little rude. He hurriedly smiled embarrassedly and said, "I'm sorry, madam. I just lost my composure. Please forgive me." After all, what he said just now really goes against common sense. Evelyn didn't get angry. Instead, she took a deep breath and sighed. "Yes, I still can't believe it's true. But in the world of mages, geniuses are different from mediocrity. The gap that ordinary mages find difficult to cross is easily crossed by geniuses. They don't even have the interest to lower their heads and look at it." She paused and stared into Andre's eyes for a full minute before asking, "Can you tell me how long it took you to become a master apothecary?" "Haha, I'm sorry, but I can't say that. Please believe me, you don't want to know the real answer." Andre put on a mysterious smile as he spoke. It wasn't that he didn't want to say it, but that he couldn't. It took him less than 2 days to reach the level of a master apothecary. Moreover, he had done some other things in between. It would be strange if he didn't say that he wasn't a monster. Of course, learning and applying were two different things. Even if everything was imprinted in the brain, it would be discounted when it came to practical application. So far, only the hero potion and genius potion could reach the level of a master. He didn't have the time to practice the rest. So, the time taken is shorter than I expected. What a terrifying talent. Evelyn's face showed unconcealable admiration and envy. It was as if she was admiring a dazzling jewel. As a mage who specialized in apothecary, she knew better than anyone what a master's technique meant. It meant that no matter what kind of magic potion was created, its effect would be 30% higher than that of an ordinary apothecary. Perhaps low-level potions didn't have much of an advantage, but once Andre's spellcasting level crossed level 11, he could immediately create many powerful potions. For example, the super potion that could permanently increase the 6 basic attributes, the life-extending potion that could increase a person's lifespan by 30 years, and so on. Unlike those ordinary magic potions, these potions that could affect the body permanently could only be used once. Drinking it a second time wouldn't have any effect. Think about it. A bottle of potion that could increase a person's lifespan by 30 years suddenly became 40 years. He was afraid that it would immediately attract countless people to fight over it. After all, there were too many powerful people in Orire who were eager to extend their lives as much as possible. They were willing to pay any price for it. Evelyn could almost foresee the future of this young man in front of her. It would be a glorious road to the legendary road that every mage yearned for. Seeing that the female mage's gaze was getting hotter and hotter, Georgie Bridle frowned and deliberately coughed. Ahem. Well, madam, let's end this topic here. Thank you very much for coming to help, but now I want to talk to Mage Andre alone. Please understand. Of course. I'll leave now. I won't disturb your next conversation. Evelyn put one hand on her chest and bowed. She turned around and left the room with her followers, closing the door behind her. She wasn't a fool. She naturally knew that it was time for the Dukes to negotiate with Andre. Since the hero potion couldn't be made by a second person, the Dukes had lost their biggest bargaining chip. What they had to do now was to come up with a satisfactory monopoly price as soon as possible. Otherwise, once a large amount of the potion was leaked during the trade war, who knew if the enemy would buy it? Chapter 309. Seeing that all the irrelevant people had left, Alexander immediately gave Duke Ian a look, and Duke Ian immediately understood. He squeezed out a smile on his expressionless face and said, "Have a seat, young man. You have proven that you are worthy of the title of Master Pharmacist. On behalf of Linton City, I welcome your potions, and I welcome your arrival." "Thank you." Andre bowed and sat on the chair, silently waiting for Duke Ian to speak first. He was very clear that through his performance just now, he had won the respect and attention of the Duke. Finally, he had the opportunity to speak on an equal footing. The next thing he had to do was to offer a condition that both sides could accept, just like in a mage association. There was nothing stronger than the union of interests in the world. As long as the hero potion could bring endless benefits to the nobles, they would treat you as their closest ally. It wouldn't take long for you to successfully integrate into their society. Duke Ian was obviously a person who didn't like to talk nonsense. After a few minutes of silence, he suddenly raised his head and stared at Andre with a sharp gaze. "State your conditions. I know you must have a complete plan in your mind right now, just like what happened in the Mage Association a few days ago." Andre didn't hold back. He smiled and nodded. "All right, then I won't hold back. I don't have many requests. There are 3 main points. First, I want the right to explore the north of Tua's Valley and the right to freely wage war. Second, I want to buy a shipyard. If that's not possible, a dozen experienced craftsmen will do. Third, I want the price of the hero potion to be exactly the same as the genius potion. If you're afraid that the enemy will get it, you can ask the auction house to add a clause that only the local nobles of Linton City can bid for it. The right to explore? The right to wage war?" Alexander's expression suddenly became a little strange. He stared at Abel for a long time, and finally couldn't hold back his curiosity. He asked tentatively, "You're not thinking of doing something to the monsters in the border forest, are you?" "Why not?" Andre's lips curled up slightly, and a cold smile appeared on his face. "These damn goblins and half-orcs dare to brazenly attack my territory. Don't blame me for taking revenge." In fact, the main reason he did this was to completely put the blame on the other party. After all, according to the rules of the game set by the Old Lich, the enemy that had yet to appear was not allowed to attack him within a year. What he needed to do was to make a fuss about this matter and see if he could take advantage of this opportunity to gain some benefits. Apart from that, he also needed to train his troops. Even though the barbarian warriors and Brand's cavalry were experienced fighters, they still needed to practice in actual combat in order to form an effective coordination between cavalry and infantry. The monsters that roamed around the forest were the best targets to kill. They could also plunder labor and weaken the enemy's strength. It was simply killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Revenge, with that little private army of yours? Oh, goddess of aristocracy. I'm afraid there's no crazier idea in the world than this." Duke Alexander exclaimed, dumbfounded. Georgie Bridle hurriedly got up and said, "That's right. The monsters in the forest were not to be trifled with. They had no fixed abode, and there were many of them. The slightest carelessness could lead to an ambush. Moreover, according to the information you've brought back recently, the monsters inside have united again. Perhaps in a few months, they will launch an all-out attack. It's too dangerous for you to go alone. It's better to give up." After the boundary between civilization and wilderness was formed, it was always the wilderness that constantly attacked civilization. There were very few civilizations that waged war against the wilderness tribes. The reason was simple. There were 2 main reasons. First, it was not worth it. As everyone knew, Every time an army was mobilized, they had to bring along a large amount of supplies. Just the supplies alone cost a lot of gold coins, not to mention the compensation for the soldiers who died in battle. What did the humanoid creatures living in the forest, wilderness, and mountains have? They had nothing. They were so poor that they could not even fill their stomachs. They could only afford to wear rough animal hides, and the weapons in their hand were mostly sticks. Metal was a luxury that only the leaders and warriors had the right to wear. Who would be willing to lose money to fight a war that could not be considered a victory no matter what? Second, transportation was inconvenient, and there was no way to confirm the target's location. Whether it was the barbarians or the half-orcs who lived in the wilderness year-round, they all followed the migration of the herds. In addition, there were many places that did not even have proper roads. By the time your army arrived, they would already be long gone. Any intelligent creature would not choose to fight a war that they did not have any hope of winning. They would usually fight if they could win and run if they could not win. Occasionally, they would join forces with the human armies of the surrounding tribes that were too deep into the wilderness to launch a siege or surprise attack. If they were not careful, the entire army would be wiped out. It was because of these factors that 99% of the nobles on the continent viewed the wilderness as a scourge. They would rather build tall walls to protect themselves than take the initiative to attack and expand their living space. Of course, there was another reason why the dukes did not allow Andre to take revenge. They were afraid that he would die at the hands of the monsters. After all, these monsters who only knew how to kill and destroy had never followed the rules of the civilized world. Even if they said that they were nobles and were willing to pay a ransom, they would not show mercy. The dukes were not fools. How could they allow a potion master with infinite potential to run into the dangerous forest and risk his life? If he really died, the loss would be huge. Please don't worry. I have a well-trained cavalry that is completely capable of sweeping the surrounding areas. In addition, I will not be personally involved. I will only be responsible for giving orders. Andre knew what the Duke was worried about, so he took the initiative to make a promise. He did not believe that there would be any tribe in the periphery that could defeat more than 350 mounted archers and more than 500 barbarian warriors in heavy armor. If they really did appear, they would definitely not be able to hide from the eyes of the elven druid, Nina. When the time came, they would retreat. Anyway, as long as they defended the valley fortress, it would be useless even if the enemy had an army of 100,000. Oh, if that's the case, then the first condition is not a problem. Besides, the north of Tua's Valley is not under our rule, so we can give you the rights to develop it. Duke Ian thought for a moment and immediately nodded. This matter was settled, and he did not even bother to bargain. Anyway, that place was originally ownerless. Even if they forcibly occupied it, it would not cause too much trouble. At most, they would just have to argue with a few unfriendly neighbors. Chapter 310. According to the general rules of the continent, uncultivated wild lands were usually owned by whoever occupied them first. When the time came, they just had to build a sentry tower or a small town on the edge of the occupied area and hang a flag as a landmark. Duke Georgie Bridle stroked the beard on his chin and pondered for a moment. Soon, he agreed. I think the third condition is not a problem, but you have to increase the number of potions to the same level as the Sorcerers Association. That is, more than 100 bottles per month. You can only have more, not less. If the raw materials are sufficient, no problem. Andre agreed without hesitation. Phew. So now we need to discuss the second condition, the shipyard or the shipwright. But before that, I want to ask, why do you want to buy a shipyard? Duke Ian's eyes flashed as he stared at Andre. As the boss behind the scenes of the largest shipyard in the city, he was particularly sensitive to this condition and would not hesitate to kill. Maritime trade was the pillar of Lincoln City, and ships were the foundation of this pillar. Therefore, the importance of a shipyard was self-evident, especially the design of a warship. It was a top secret, and all the craftsmen who had participated in the construction of ships had more or less seen part of the design. It would be strange if he was not nervous. It's nothing. I want to modify the pirate ship in my hands, or build a new warship to participate in the trade war. It has always been my dream to sail on a ship and be a free pirate. Now that I have the opportunity, why not give it a try? At this point, Andre suddenly stood up, raised his hands, and shouted fanatically, "Think about it! On the vast and boundless sea, plunder merchant ships wantonly, sink enemy warships, loot coastal towns. This is the romance of a man." The Duke's mouths were wide open as they stared at the young man in front of them. They could not believe that he would say such a thing. Duke Ian, who was the most knowledgeable about sailing, wanted to bang his head against the wall. Romance? Only an idiot would think so. In his opinion, sailing was a complete torture, excluding the poor sanitation and the constantly swaying hammocks. The food and water alone were enough for most people to drink a pot. What did the sailors of this world eat and drink? It was scary to say it out loud. Dry biscuits and bread that had been gnawed by rats many times. The cured meat was as hard as a rock. Due to the lack of preservatives, they could only add salt as much as they could. The sourness was simply unbelievable. What was even more terrifying was that the cured meat had been stored in wooden barrels for a long time, and its fiber structure was basically similar to that of cable. Sailors jokingly called it pickled rope. Even the controversial zombie meat on Earth was 10,000 times better than this thing. Finally, there were cheese and eggs that only the captain, chief officer, and navigators could enjoy. Usually, in order to ensure that there were no accidents, ships would raise a few laying hens to improve their lives. As for water, I'm so sorry. No, to be exact, only a very small amount was carried, and it was usually placed in a groove near the mast on the uppermost deck. The sailors called it the spring of the sea, and anyone who was thirsty could go and drink a mouthful. However, the shelf life of this spring was a little short. After a few days, under the nourishment of microbes, it would begin to deteriorate and smell. In the end, not to mention drinking it, even smelling it would make one vomit. During a voyage, the only thing that could be drunk was a large amount of low-quality ale mixed with water. As for washing their faces, brushing their teeth, and cleaning their personal hygiene, it was best to stop dreaming. Unless it was raining and they could take a shower, otherwise, they would have to endure until they reached shore. Imagine a group of men with a pungent body odor squeezing together on the lower deck. What a spectacular scene it would be. It would probably stink for 10 miles in the wind. Although more than 60% of the nobles in Linton City were engaged in maritime trade. Unless it was necessary, they would never personally take a ship out to sea because it was completely a torture. Andre's crazy behavior and declaration not only did not cause any sympathy, but it also attracted a wave of strange gazes and terrifying silence. Perhaps because he had acted too rationally and maturely just now, the Dukes subconsciously regarded him as an adult. They did not expect him to have such a whimsical side, so they did not react for a long time. After all, even if he added up his two lives together, Andre's actual age was not more than 40 years old. Especially when he lived on Earth, it allowed him to retain many of the interests and dreams he had when he was young. The reason why he rarely showed them was simple. The situation did not allow it. Since the moment he came to this world, he was constantly under immense pressure to survive. He was too busy just feeding his family. So how could he have the time to think about his interests? However, after coming to Linton City and gradually settling down, Andre's restless heart began to stir again, especially when he saw wooden sailboats with white sails going in and out of the dock. He always had an inexplicable throbbing, and his childhood dreams kept appearing in his mind. As the saying went, the more outstanding a man was, the more childish he would be in certain aspects. There were many famous people in history who could prove this point. For example, George Washington founded the United States of America, but his nightgown was still embroidered with a little brown bear. Another example was Winston Churchill, the British Prime Minister. He defeated the Third Reich in the Second World War, but when he caught a cold and had his cigarettes secretly taken away by his housekeeper, he was so angry that he took off his shoes at the negotiating table and knocked on the wooden stool. Although it sounded inconceivable, there were many similar examples. If one were to list them one by one, it would take more than a day and night to list them all. From a certain perspective, childishness was a way for men to relieve themselves of pressure. Through these actions, they could release the accumulated pressure and slow down the pace of their lives, allowing them to vent all their anger and dissatisfaction in a carefree manner. Then, they could go on their way. Andre didn't know if it was because his nerves had been stretched too thin recently, so he really wanted to go out to sea and be a pirate for a period of time. In any case, there was not much danger at the start of the trade war, and he also had the rank 3 Arcane spell Flight. Even if he encountered an enemy he could not defeat, he could still easily escape. Of course, his other goal was to try and modify a sail-powered battleship and personally test its performance. If his metallurgy skills allowed, he also planned to get a few cannons to play with and experience the era of navigation in another world. This would make his dream come true. Chapter 3:11. After a full 5 minutes, Duke Ian finally came back to his senses. He smiled bitterly and muttered to himself, "A man's romance, huh? I hope you can still say that half a month after you've been on a ship. Ha ha. It's not bad for a young man to have a dream. I'll give you 5 skilled shipbuilders and 200 cans of fire oil for free." Duke Georgie promised as he laughed. In his eyes, this was a child's game. A few shipbuilders were nothing to a shipyard. It was a sentimental investment. Duke Alexander quickly added with a smile, "That's right. This is what young men should be like. I'll also give you 5 free boatmen and some processed iron pearwood. I hope you can sink Bakarov's warships and capture their merchant ships in battle. Then I'll join in the fun. I'll also give you 5 shipbuilders and 200 crossbows." Duke Loretta Botons, who had been silent all this time, gave out a generous gift. Seeing that the other 3 had expressed their stance, Duke Ian's face showed a trace of helplessness. He sighed slightly and said, "Well, I'll give you 15 boatmen and all the necessary tools for the transformation for free." Andre was very happy to receive 30 shipbuilders in one go. He hurriedly stood up and bowed with one hand on his chest. "Thank you for your generosity. I'll remember this kindness, and I'll repay you many times over soon." Duke Georgie waved his hand lightly. "No need. As long as you can provide us with 100 heroic potions every month, that's the best you can do for us. Remember, if you encounter any danger at sea, immediately reveal your identity and surrender. Don't try to be brave. Although Lincoln City and Bacaro City are enemies, we're all civilized people. We won't kill a noble so easily. You just need to pay a ransom later." "I understand. I know how to protect myself. If something like that happens, I'll use a spell to escape. It's not easy to catch a mage who has mastered a rank 3 arcane spell. If there's nothing else, I'll go back and get some sleep. I haven't slept for 2 days because I've been researching a new potion." After saying that, Andre turned around and was about to leave. He felt that he had completed his task, and there was no need to continue chatting. It was time for him to eat some lunch and have a good sleep. At the same time, he wanted to give his tired brain a good rest. However, just as he was about to push the door open, Loretta Botons suddenly stood up and said, "Wait, I'll send you out through the secret door at the back. I reckon the main square is surrounded by countless citizens now. You won't be able to leave even if you want to." Alexander nodded in agreement. "Well, you're so thoughtful. Something as important as starting a trade war would always cause a huge commotion, so it was safer to go through the back door. As for the relevant legal documents, I will ask the City Hall to process them as soon as possible. They will be sent to your place in about 2 to 3 days. Come with me." Lorton walked directly to a nearby wall and turned the candlestick on the side. In an instant, the bookshelf in front of the wall made a sound of gears grinding. After 1 or 2 seconds, the bookshelf and the wall slowly rotated 90 degrees, revealing the secret passage hidden inside. Andre noticed that this wasn't magic, but a simple mechanical application. First, an iron pillar was inserted between the wall and the bookshelf. Then, a gear and a chain were connected to each other. When the candlestick was turned, the chain would immediately transfer the power to the gear, and the rotating gear would rotate the iron pillar with the scale. This way, the secret door could be opened. Perhaps there were a few labor-saving mechanisms in the middle, but they were hidden in the middle of the mezzanine and couldn't be seen clearly. Please tell the coachman to wait for the crowd to disperse before going back. After saying that, he went into the secret door without looking back and quickly passed through the narrow tunnel. In fact, many buildings on the Oleo continent had a few secret passages for escape. Nobles and merchants would often choose to secretly dig such a passage when they were building their mansions to prevent the worst from happening. Although more than 90% of the families didn't use them, it had become a common practice after so many years. From the looks of it, the people who used these secret passages the most were often men and women who had affairs behind their husbands' or wives' backs. Secret passages were even a necessary part of love stories. According to Andre's knowledge, the underground passages of Lincoln City were crisscrossed and mixed together with the sewers. It was like a huge maze, and many of the ancient areas were so complicated that even the designer himself might not be able to recognize them. Just as he was secretly guessing where this secret passage led to, Loretta Botons, who was walking in front, stopped for some reason and slowly turned around. The corner of his mouth lifted slightly as he elegantly bowed. "Greetings, my dear opponent. According to the original plan, I wanted to invite you to the banquet that will be held in a few days, but who would have thought that you would cause such a huge commotion in just a few days? Especially today's potion-making performance. It was simply amazing. It didn't seem like it was made by a youth at all. I've been studying potion-making for 10 years, but I can't even reach a third of your level. If it's convenient, please allow me to ask, are you also my mentor's apprentice?" After hearing this, Andre's pupils suddenly dilated and then quickly contracted a second later. He instantly activated the arcane spell on his secondary defensive staff that he used every day. First, a blue translucent eggshell-shaped shield wrapped around his body. Then, his skin was covered with gray-white stones. Finally, his entire body gradually became blurry, creating a very strange illusion for the eyes of others. Rank 1 arcane spell, shield spell, activate. While the spell is in effect, you are immune to magic missiles. At the same time, all physical attacks will be deflected to a certain extent. Rank 4 arcane spell, stone skin spell, activate. While the spell is in effect, all physical attacks will be reduced to a certain extent. Rank 2 arcane spell, haze spell, activate. While the spell is in effect, the enemy will not be able to determine your position, and all attacks will be deflected to a certain extent. Seeing the information that flashed in his vision, Andre felt a little safer. He carefully took a few steps back and asked in a low voice, "You're the mastermind behind all of this? The legendary Lich's apprentice?" Chapter 3:12. Haha, relax, don't be so nervous. We're just getting to know each other today. That's right, it's me, Lorton Botones, the youngest Duke of Lincoln City. Who else do you think would be able to conceal such a large force without batting an eyelid? Lorton opened his arms and asked with a big laugh. He seemed very confident. He didn't cast any defensive spells on himself, but the surging magic on his body was enough to explain many things. Why did you do that? What good would it do you to summon a demon to destroy this city? Andre frowned as he resisted the urge to use his magic ring to escape. He knew that with his current strength and mental state, he had no chance of winning at all. Coupled with the flash of magic resonance just now, his brain had already sent out a red alert. Staying away from danger was the instinct of every normal life form, but Andre was actively suppressing this instinct. He wanted to understand why Brindle would become a demon worshipper. After all, that was something only an Avenger and a madman would do. What kind of stimulation did a duke with a bright future and a legendary Lich's apprentice go through to do such a crazy thing? Loretta seemed to see the confusion in Andre's eyes. He instantly burst out laughing. "Ha ha, that's a good question. As one of the rulers of this city, why would I want to destroy it? The reason is simple. Because I'm bored. I believe you've seen how stupid those stupid mortals are. As long as I'm willing, I can cause more than half of the cities in the Green Sea Alliance to fall into unprecedented chaos. But what can I do? Can I be satisfied by being the king of a bunch of idiots? No, that's not what I want. What I want is excitement. The fear that comes from the bottom of my heart. The fear of brushing shoulders with the Grim Reaper. But it's a pity that they can't give me these things. Even my mentor can't find an opponent who can match me. I have no choice but to raise the difficulty of the game and see what will happen if I summon a great demon that is considered a taboo by the gods' churches. As for whether Lincoln City will be destroyed or whether the citizens will die, it has nothing to do with me. Since they can't give me any excitement, they are useless trash. Isn't it just right to sacrifice them to the demons? Slaughter, filth, death, the rise of desire. I really want to know what it will be like when the demons take over this world. Perhaps the thing I want the most. Of course, your appearance also surprised me. To be exact, it's a pleasant surprise. Even though you haven't fully grown, you can already sit across from me like a real chess player and have a real contest with me. Loriton waved his arms, becoming more and more energetic as he spoke. The more he spoke, the crazier his expression became. His eyes, in particular, shone with a mixture of excitement and fanaticism. He was like a completely different person from before. Andre stared at him for a full 10 minutes. Finally, he couldn't take it anymore and shouted, "That's enough. Stop that act. Even though you're acting teet-teet. I'm not blind, and I'm not mentally retarded. You want to pretend to be a complete lunatic? Let's mess up your meticulous plan first." In fact, one could best see a person's character from their way of doing things. In a series of confrontations, Andre could feel that this guy's intelligence, logical thinking, analytical ability, and ability to control his subordinates were absolutely top-notch. How could such a person be an irrational lunatic? Ayaya, did you really see through it? The crazy expression on Loretta's face disappeared in an instant, and he regained his calm state. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly, and he spread his hands playfully. You have to know that acting is one of my few hobbies. When I was 14, I even went on stage to perform a few operas. But it's a pity that you're not interested in this kind of elegant art. Otherwise, we would definitely have a lot of common topics. After all, the people who understand you the most are often not your family or friends, but your opponents. What do you want to do? Andre didn't want to continue listening to that boring nonsense, so he directly interrupted the other party's pretentious sigh. What do I want to do? Of course, I'm here to put on a wonderful show. The script and stage have already been set up, with the surrounding area of Lincoln City as the background. I'm an evil mage who wants to summon a great demon to destroy everything, and you're a smart and calm hero of justice. How's that? Isn't this setting very immersive? As he spoke, Loretta suddenly moved closer, and with lightning speed, he took off Andre's hood. He used his fingers to lightly touch the flame-like upside-down hair, and very infatuatedly exclaimed, "Such rich fire elemental energy, and such a beautiful and dazzling red. You're practically a natural choice to play the main character. I'm really looking forward to it." Scram. As a person with a rather strong self-esteem, Andre was very angry at such an extreme provocation. He didn't have the slightest intention of going easy, and without a second word, he used his innate ability as a descendant of fire elementals. Flame extension. The terrifying fire elemental energy was completely gathered in a short second. The next second, boom! With a loud sound, a bright firestorm instantly engulfed everything. The secret passage was very narrow to begin with, not even a meter wide. It could only allow two people who weren't very fat to walk side by side, so there was no space to dodge at all. Loretta was almost immediately engulfed by the scorching flames. But what was strange was that although he kept screaming in pain, he didn't move at all, allowing the high temperature to wantonly corrode the surface of his body. This strange phenomenon made Andre feel a little uneasy, and he immediately retreated a few steps to open up the distance between them. He quickly began to chant in a low voice, and in the blink of an eye, he completed a rank 1 arcane spell, Magic Missile. for bullets made of magic energy emitted a faint glow, and in an instant, they drew beautiful arcs and accurately hit the enemy's head, making a few muffled sounds. This wasn't the end. The moment the magic missile hit the target, he immediately pulled out the tri-edged dagger that he always carried with him and rushed forward with a whoosh. His whole body was like an arrow released from a bow, and he directly stabbed the fatal dagger into the enemy's chest. His speed was so fast that it was hard to believe that this was the action of a mage. Chapter 314. Ever since he came to this world, Andre had brushed shoulders with death many times. He was already used to facing ordinary danger. Although it was not as ordinary as eating and drinking, it was not to the extent that he would be frightened. Otherwise, he would not have risked his life to fight the necromancer. However, as the saying went, fear stemmed from the unknown. It was human nature to be fearful of anything they did not understand, especially those mysterious arcane techniques recorded in books. For example, the ability to directly control a person's thoughts or enter a state of relative stillness to do as they pleased. In short, such unscientific but magical things had always been in Andre's subconscious mind. Unless he thoroughly understood the operating principles of these arcane spells, he would be more or less nervous. As the hostility in his eyes became more and more intense, Loretta Botons pretended to be innocent and shrugged his shoulders. "Don't be so fierce. I'm full of excitement and expectations for you. Work hard, young man. Although you have a lot of potential now, you are not enough to be my opponent. Just like what the teacher said, I have to give you some time to grow. When the time comes, this game will be very interesting. Also, I'm only level 15, and I specialize in enchantment. I'm not as strong as you think." "Enchantment master?" No wonder. Andre muttered softly to himself, and a trace of understanding appeared on his face. Aurere's enchantment school was not like the classes in most games that added special attributes to weapons and armor. Instead, it was closer to mind control, representing spells such as suggestion, charm humans, charm monsters, and so on. In a simpler way, it was the school that controlled the actions and thoughts of others. This kind of mage was addicted to playing with the opponent's mind, and more or less had some mental problems. They were full of perverts and even had multiple personalities. After figuring this out, he gradually let go of his hostility and took a deep breath to completely calm down. He then asked in a deep voice, "Put away your boring little tricks. You're still far from being able to leave a shadow in my heart. Tell me, why did you suddenly come to meet me this time? If it's just to show the difference in strength, then congratulations, you have achieved your goal. I can't compare to a great mage now, but that doesn't mean I can't in the future. Oh, you actually managed to escape from my trap so quickly. You calmed down quite quickly. I originally planned to play for a while longer, but it seems that I can't anymore." Loretta pretended to sigh regretfully. However, his depression only lasted for less than 2 seconds, and he immediately put on a cynical expression. "Don't worry, I'm only here today to see what a genius that can be praised by a teacher looks like. I don't have any other intentions. By the way, I heard that my orc army took the initiative to attack your territory. As compensation, I will turn a blind eye to your little tricks for the next year. Remember, don't push your luck. If I find out that you've crossed the line, I'll retaliate." "Umph. How dare you say that? You clearly broke the rules of the game first, yet you're pretending to be charitable. As expected of an enchantment specialist, you actually want to use this opportunity to distort the truth." Andre purposely put on a disdainful look as he mocked. In fact, from the moment he put the bucket of sh*T on the other party's head, he had already thought of how to make use of this matter to gain an advantage in the initial friction and confrontation. Of course, it was also thanks to the inconvenience of communication in this world. Coupled with the fact that he acted quickly and ruthlessly, there were no clues left behind. Even the corpses on the battlefield were thrown down the mountain stream and washed into the sea by the rapid current. If not, who knows who would be the one causing trouble now? Seeing that his intentions were exposed, Loretta didn't fly into a rage out of humiliation. Instead, he spread out his hands and laughed. Ha ha ha. Then what do you think we should do? Do you want my teacher to mediate? That's not necessary, but since you broke the rules of the game, you have to pay the corresponding price, isn't that right? Andre didn't back down and retorted. The reason why he was so aggressive was mainly to test the other party's bottom line, so as to set the tone for his actions in the next year. After all, the rule set by the old Lich was not to initiate an attack within a year, but there wasn't a clear definition of initiating an attack. What would be considered as initiating an attack? Would sending a spy to spy on the other party count? Would getting rid of those eyesores count? All in all, it was too vague. Today was a good opportunity to reach a consensus. That's right. Those who break the rules of the game must be punished. My subordinates have committed an unforgivable mistake, so as their master, I have to deal with the aftermath. But now I'm curious. What is the price you're talking about? As an apprentice recognized by the legendary Lich, Loretta was obviously very smart. He immediately understood Andre's intention and kicked the ball back to him. In such a situation, if he were to speak first, he would lose the initiative. He wouldn't commit such a low-level mistake. Andre had already expected him to do this, so he said without holding back, I want the ownership of the land 50 kilometers north of Two-Ways Valley, and that includes the monsters that enter this area. If you still have subordinates in this area, then I'm sorry, but I'm afraid you'll have to give them up. Apart from that, you have to promise that you won't harass or attack my territory, caravans, ships, and related industries. Similarly, I won't touch anything that belongs to you. As for the nobles, pirates, and merchants in the middle, we'll see who can gain more power through our own means. Loretta squinted his eyes and thought for a moment. He nodded lightly. All right, I can afford this price. I can also give you another promise. No matter how fierce the battle is in the dark, as long as you don't cross the red line, I won't personally make a move. Work hard. I'm looking forward to a different surprise in a year's time. After saying that, he took 2 steps forward and stretched out his right hand. Don't worry, I promise to give you a big surprise. Andre didn't back down. He also stretched out his right hand and shook it. Despite the fact that he was going against someone whose spell casting level was more than double his own, which made him feel a little nervous and excited, he didn't show it on his face at all. Instead, he looked calm and composed. Chapter 315. Aha! I advise you not to be too arrogant, and don't underestimate the hidden power of this city. Do you know why I have such a huge force, but have never dared to make a move openly? Use your brain more, and pay attention to any abnormal situations. You and I are not the only ones participating in this game. The only one who has the power to set the rules is the mentor himself. The world is huge, but we are insignificant. Every step you take must be careful. This is my last advice to you. After Loretta finished speaking, he gracefully turned around and made a gesture of invitation. All right, let's end our first conversation here. I won't waste your precious time. Follow the passage and you'll see the exit soon. Thank you. I think I've already seen part of it. Goodbye. As soon as he finished speaking, Andre immediately removed the defensive magic on his body and put on his hood again. He turned around and walked towards the exit, staring at his back that was gradually disappearing into the darkness. Loretta's face suddenly became distorted. He smirked and licked his lips. Hee. A perfect prey. I really want to rip your throat out. Drink your hot blood. I believe it will be delicious. A second later, for some reason, his expression returned to normal. He raised his hand and covered his eyes as he muttered to himself. Calm down. Calm down. Now is not the time. My opponent this time is someone who has been chosen by my mentor. I don't want to be torn to pieces by powerful arcane spells. But I'm so excited. I can't control myself. Damn it. Why did I let such a perfect prey appear, but I can't do anything? Shut up. You still have the nerve to say that. If I didn't quickly take over control of the body, he would have discovered our biggest secret. I don't care. I'm bored to death. Exciting. I want excitement. Sigh. I really don't know what to do with you. All right, let's go out and have some fun. Maybe it'll be fun to summon a demon and throw it into the knight's camp. Ha ha! What are we waiting for? Let's move. Blood. Slaughter. I love to hear the anguished wails and despair of those idiots before they die. In the dark tunnel, Loretta Botons muttered to himself like a lunatic. One moment he was rational, the next he was crazy. After several alternations, he finally went completely crazy. If Andre were here, he would definitely find that this guy was exactly the same as when he first started to clamor about destroying everything. The secret passage from a municipal building to the outside world was not long. After walking for less than 5 minutes, Andre came out of an abandoned warehouse. He shook off the dust on his body and looked up at the surrounding environment. Not long after, he was surprised to find that this place was not far from the municipal building. It was only 2 streets away. However, because it was close to the intersection of the sewer and the moat, the air was always filled with a foul smell, so there was no one around at all. It was quiet and remote. Looking at the muddy river in front of him, he covered his nose and muttered to himself, "It's really a perfect escape route. As long as I jump down from here and follow the river, I can reach the dock in a few minutes and escape on a boat." But it smells a little bad. Linton City was actually a city built on a riverbank. A long time ago, this was the estuary of the Byland River. However, when the city was expanding, the rulers used the power of magic to forcibly divide the river into 2, forming a chevron around the city and forming a natural moat. In order to ensure that household waste would not cause too much pollution to the city, the original designers dug out 2 huge pipes hidden under the city walls. Normally, under the impact of the water flow, all the dirty things in the sewer would be washed away. Unfortunately, they didn't expect the threat of the algae. These little things looked a little inconspicuous, but they could change the water quality, allowing anaerobic bacteria to grow in large numbers. Over time, they form a large, green, stinky ditch. Of course, this did not have much to do with Andre. He was thinking about what to do next. After all, he was not the ruler of this city. Rather than worrying about the living environment of the residents, it was better to think about how to quickly raise his wizard rank. No matter what, he had to reach rank 13 or above within a year. Otherwise, there was no hope of victory. A rank 15 Great Wizard meant that he had grasped a powerful rank 8 Arcane spell. If he wanted to face him head-on, a rank 7 Arcane spell was necessary. This point could be confirmed in the short battle just now. A mere rank 6 illusion spell, false image spell, was enough to fool him. Fortunately, Loretta Botons had no intention of making a move. Otherwise, he would have no other choice but to run. In a battle between mages, every 2 levels was a qualitative leap. For example, a rank 1 wizard only had rank 1 spell slots, so he could only learn rank 1 arcane spells. A rank 3 wizard only had rank 2 spell slots, so he could learn rank 2 arcane spells, and so on. Then, how big was the gap between low-level and high-level magic? Perhaps for an ordinary wizard, this was a difficult question to answer. However, for Andre, who had the ability to analyze data, it was simple. He just had to look at the damage. Take evocation spells as an example. The rank 0 arcane spell, Tremor Electric Shock, usually had a damage value between 1 and 5 points. Generally speaking, it could only kill ordinary people with weaker physiques. The rank 1 arcane spell, Magic Missile, began to double the damage, with each bullet having 2 to 5 points. The higher the wizard's rank, the more they could shoot. The highest number could be 5, which was 10 to 25 points. Even if it did not hit a vital point, it was enough to kill a professional below rank 5. Not to mention rank 2 arcane spells. Melf's Acid Arrow, once hit a target, would cause 2 to 4 points of damage every 6 seconds. The higher the wizard's rank, the longer the duration. There was no upper limit. It was said that in the hands of a great wizard, this spell could even disintegrate an elephant alive. As for rank 3 arcane spells, they were even more frightening. The lightning spell could cause 1 to 6 points of damage per rank. Not only was there no upper limit, but it was also a group attack. Along the way, it would melt some metals with low melting points, such as lead, copper, silver, gold, and so on. It could be said that every increase in arcane level would cause a great change to the wizard. The most direct change was the damage value of these arcane spells. Chapter 316. Using this as a reference, Andre came to a shocking conclusion. If one ignored intelligence, mental state, battle experience, physical fitness, external environment, magical equipment, poison, assassination, sneak attacks, and other factors, a low-ranked wizard could only challenge an opponent 3 levels higher than himself. Otherwise, if the difference in the level of arcane spells between the two sides was 2 levels, the chances of victory would be 0. In fact, anyone who could become an advanced mage would definitely have a high IQ. Moreover, the higher the mage's level, the more obvious their advantages would be. They would have more magic equipment, scrolls, and potions than low-level mages. Lastly, they would have more spell slots. As long as they weren't careless or under special circumstances, victory was almost certain. Think about it. 2 people were fighting barehanded. One of them was tall, strong, smart, had fast reflexes, and could run and jump. How likely would it be for the weaker one to win? It was obvious that unless the opponent had learned some fighting techniques, and their physical fitness couldn't be too weak. Otherwise, they would be knocked to the ground in the blink of an eye. To Andre, the knowledge stored in his brain from Earth and Ulysses spellbooks were fighting techniques, and a level 13 wizard was his physical fitness. Only when he had both of these would he have the qualifications to challenge Loretta Botons. Before that, he had to strengthen his own influence as quickly as possible. Otherwise, the other party's status as a duke would be a huge problem. As the saying goes, there is no such thing as fairness in this world. All we can do is to work hard and try our best to close the gap between us. Complaining all the time will only make the gap between us bigger and bigger. There is no use at all. From the beginning, Andre had a premonition that this game wouldn't be easy. However, after seeing Loretta Botons with his own eyes today, he realized that it wasn't just not easy. It was practically hell on earth. A level 15 great wizard, a duke standing at the peak of the nobility in Lincoln City, and the master of the border forest. Any one of these titles would be enough to cause a commotion, and all of them were concentrated on one person. If it weren't for the fact that he was born with an unyielding spirit and had a year of buffer time, he would have definitely run as far as he could, because he couldn't see any hope of victory. Walking and thinking, Andre unknowingly took a big detour and returned to the small square in front of the municipal building. Just as he passed by the left side of the street, he suddenly heard someone calling his name from behind. He quickly turned around to take a look. A middle-aged man with a mustache and black noble attire was sitting on a speeding carriage. He waved his hand and shouted, "Wait! Wizard Andre, please wait." While they were talking, the carriage quickly caught up. The coachman's driving skills were very good. In just a few seconds, the carriage slowed down and stopped directly beside Andre. The middle-aged man hurriedly opened the door and jumped out of the car without waiting for the servant to kneel down. He bowed enthusiastically. "It's such a pleasure to see you here. Now, let me introduce myself. My name is Virginia Wickley, Viscount of Linton City. The one sitting in the carriage is my daughter, Cecilia." "Nice to meet you, Your Excellency Viscount. May I know why you stopped me?" Andre asked very calmly. He didn't show any friendliness, nor did he show any coldness that kept people thousands of miles away. As the saying goes, don't slap a smiling face. When others showed kindness to you, you'd better return the kindness. At least, you shouldn't offend people for no reason. Otherwise, you'd immediately give people a bad impression of being unruly and arrogant. In the interactions between people, such people would usually be isolated. No matter how talented they were, they wouldn't have a good ending. I don't dare to accept your honorable task. I just wanted to invite you to lunch, and then we'll go to the auction house together in the afternoon to participate in this month's premium auction. I wonder if you have time?" Virginia said as he raised his head, his face full of sincerity and expectation. He had waited here for a full hour and finally managed to catch him. No matter what, he didn't want to return empty-handed. "Auction? Can you tell me more about it?" When he heard about the premium auction, Andre's interest was immediately piqued. He had long heard that the auction house in the city would hold a special auction at the end of every month. Just the entrance fee alone was 500 gold coins, and the starting price of each item was more than 10,000 gold coins. There were magical items that countless people dreamed of, as well as all kinds of rare materials. Occasionally, one could even see a princess or a prince of a fallen country in the slave auction. Obviously, among all the auction items, the one that attracted him the most was definitely the rare materials, especially the branches of magical plants and the bones of large magical beasts that were needed to make the fireball magic staff. These two things were not something that could be easily seen in the market. As for the two nail-sized rubies and diamond powder, they could be sold in jewelry stores. As for the blood of the fire elemental creatures, he could directly draw some of it from himself. Perhaps because she heard that Andre didn't directly refuse, Virginia was secretly relieved. She introduced with a smile, "As far as I know, there are a total of 3 items in this month's auction. The first item is a golden statue from the desert ruins in the south. It should be something left behind by a fallen god. It contains a powerful energy that can be used to cast healing spells. The second item is a strange map. According to the appraisal of scholars, it recorded the location of a mage tower that disappeared in the mountains in the west 750 years ago. It is said that the owner of the tower was once a very powerful mage. There is endless knowledge and wealth buried in the tower. Many mages in the Mage Association have shown great interest in it. The last item is a little special. It is a young bear hound. In order to capture it, a mercenary group from outside the city lost 30 of their best men. It was a massacre, but fortunately, it is worth it. Large magical beasts with unlimited potential like this are always in short supply. Even I want to try and see if I can capture it. In addition to these 3 items, there are also many magical items and rare materials. I believe there will be something that you need. Capture a young bear hound? These guys are crazy for money." Andre was dumbfounded and exclaimed in surprise. He couldn't believe that there were people who were crazy to such an extent. Was this the legendary saying that if you don't seek death, you won't die? Chapter 3:17. As the name suggested, the bearhound was a magical creature that was a cross between a bear and a dog. They generally walked on all 4s, were good at running, climbing, swimming, sneaking, had a keen sense of smell, and could see normally in places without any light. Their intelligence was higher than most humans, and they could usually learn more than 2 languages. They also had the ability to change the attitude of wild beasts. In a critical situation, they could easily recruit an army of wild beasts in the forest and launch crazy attacks and revenge on a target. They were very dangerous enemies. In addition, the claws and teeth of these big guys were harder than steel and were equivalent to the lowest level of magic weapons. It was said that a chainmail made of fine steel could be torn into pieces with just 1 blow. A normal adult bearhound was 2 meters tall on all 4s and weighed nearly a ton. It could easily carry something as heavy as itself while running. If it was properly trained, not only could it help its master in battle, it could also become an excellent mount. In a monster illustration handbook, the challenge rating of a bearhound was 7, which was only 1 level lower than a succubus. This showed how powerful it was. Most importantly, during the breeding period, these terrifying beasts would gather together in pairs. Anyone who wanted to attack them would be crazy. In Andre's eyes, it was already a miracle that this mercenary group was still alive. It was a mere 30 people. He didn't even dare to imagine what kind of terrifying scenes these pitiful mercenaries had experienced along the way. They probably had to keep one eye open even when they were eating or sleeping. Otherwise, they would lose their lives to the sharp claws and bloody jaws if they were distracted. Of course, the greater the sacrifice, the greater the reward. Although they had suffered a great loss, those who survived were about to become rich. According to the calculation of the combat power of an adult bearhound, a bearhound was equivalent to 4 to 6 professional warriors below level 7 and had a lifespan of 200 to 300 years. Whether it was to be used as a guard to protect the family or to be trained as a mount to charge into the battlefield. It was very cost-effective. The price would probably be raised to 300,000 to 400,000 gold coins by the fanatical nobles. Virginia spread out her hands and said in a half-joking tone, "Of course they are crazy. You have to know that the charm of gold coins is endless. Moreover, these mercenaries came from the chaotic Camel Desert. I heard that they were a small tribe that lost their oasis and needed a large sum of money to buy food and water to settle their people. Otherwise, they would all starve and die of thirst. Oh, so it's for survival and continuity. No wonder they chose to take such a big risk." Andre nodded thoughtfully. After being in Linton City for so long, he had heard some rumors about the surrounding areas. He knew that the Great Camel Desert was a place that could only be reached by sailing westward for 1.5 months. It was said that the temperature there could reach 60 degrees during the day. Cooking rice there only required stones under the sun. There was no need to even start a fire. Due to the harsh environment, the oasis became the only place in the desert where people could live. In order to seize these precious lands, small-scale wars and conflicts would break out every once in a while. The victors would gain the right to live and reproduce in the oasis, while the losers would be reduced to slaves, desert bandits, and refugees. Among them, the luckier ones were able to make it to the Pearl of the Desert, Camel City, and then take a boat to other areas. The unlucky ones all died along the way, becoming dried corpses buried under the yellow sand. To these homeless people who didn't have a fixed income, the males would usually choose to become mercenaries, pirates, or thugs. The females would be reduced to prostitutes standing on the streets. As for the elderly and children, most of them couldn't survive the cruel environment. The few children who could enter the city could only rely on stealing to survive. The Great Camel Desert stretched for more than 1,700 kilometers and had more than 3,000 oases of various sizes. The largest oasis was Linton City, which was 5 times the size of the surrounding areas. A self-proclaimed successor of the ancient Milan Kingdom had established the Milan Kingdom there and was actively expanding to the surrounding areas. It was the most powerful force in the area. As for the rest, they all followed the law of the jungle, where the strong preyed on the weak. Whoever had the biggest fist would be able to occupy the richest and largest oasis, especially those valiant warriors who survived the fierce battles. Each of them had extraordinary strength. The fact that they could survive the pursuit of bears and hounds was the best proof. As a cunning noble, Virginia could tell that Andre was interested in this mercenary group. She struck while the iron was hot and said, "I know the leader of this mercenary group. If you need, I can help to pull some strings. They will be heading to the auction site this afternoon. It's on the way. Then I'll accept your offer. But before that, I have to go back to withdraw some money. Otherwise, I won't be able to bid for anything that I like." Andre shrugged with a smile. "Ha ha, there's no need for that. If there's anything that you like, just let me know. I can help to pay for it. Let's go and have a meal first. There's a good restaurant not far ahead. The seafood there is delicious." Virginia put on a forthright look and opened the door of the carriage. She gestured for Rode to get in. At the same time, her daughter, who was sitting in the carriage, revealed a sweet smile. She waved her hand lightly and purposely pulled her collar down to show her unfathomable cleavage. Seeing that it was hard to refuse, Andre didn't refuse. He stepped into the carriage and sat on the soft chair. He bowed slightly to the young lady in front of him. "It's a pleasure to meet you, beautiful Miss Cecilia. My name is Andre." "Hee, you're too polite. I should be the honored one. You have to know that ever since the pirates hiding in the sewers were eliminated, you have become the hero in the hearts of countless women in this city. Of course, what happened after was even more amazing. No matter if it was defending against the attack of more than 2,000 barbarians, or eliminating the invading beastmen and gnomes in one fell swoop. All of these are perfect examples of wisdom and courage. It had to be said that this noble lady, who looked to be around 20 years old and wore a sexy beige dress, was very skilled in speaking. She praised Andre's achievements without leaving any traces, and also secretly hinted at her admiration for him. She had obviously received professional training. No matter if it was her speech, actions, or expressions. They were all on point. She knew what men liked to hear, and also understood that the true essence of seduction was the hazy feeling between revealing and not revealing. Every time she spoke, she would adjust her posture to show her most beautiful figure. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.